evening, and welcome to episode 16, sweet little 16 of Tomorrow's World Audit Time.
That's disgusting.
Good evening, Mark.
Hello, Russell. How are you?
Yeah, good, Mark. A little bit scared about World War III, but other than that, everything's going pretty good for me. How about you?
I mean, I wasn't scared about World War III until you just mentioned it there. But yeah, other than that, it's fine. Yeah, the world has changed since we last spoke. Yeah.
It's got a bit more explodey.
Yeah, it's getting closer, isn't it?
One thing they do here in Amsterdam is on the first Monday of every month, they test the air raid sirens in the city. Which
Do they really?
They do, yeah. Obviously, presumably they're a bit more scared of being invaded than, a bit more used to being invaded than we are. So they still test big air raid sirens every month. And obviously the most recent test, I sort of woke up to the sound of air raid sirens in the environs of my flat. And it took me a while to go, oh no, it's okay. They test them, don't they? So,
can you do an impression?
Sort of...
So it's the classic kind of...
Yeah, pretty much the classic. Hang on a minute, I've got a recording of it on my phone.
All right.
Let's see if I can play it.
Yeah, all right, cool. That's weird.
Yeah, so if you were wanting to invade the Netherlands or bomb it, your best bet would be do so on the first Monday of a month, and absolutely no one would bat an eyelid, and you'd be able to sneak in
under the cover of an air raid shelter,
yeah,
of an air raid siren. Yeah.
But anyway, taking into account the current geopolitical situation, we thought that a good episode to do would be the episode that is closest to the aftermath of the Chernobyl nuclear accident. Any memories of that particular incident, Mark?
Of the incident, yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I have been to Chernobyl. I mean, let's not pretend that we haven't for a start. And
I was keeping our plutonium dry, Mark.
I know. It's more like I mean, if you're going to ask me it's like, as I said in the notes as well, it's like I was 5.5 when the Chernobyl incident happened, and I genuinely believe it's the first real international news story that scared me or kind of shook me out of my childhood. So, obviously there were wars aplenty, and, growing up in Dublin, I'm sure, we got news every day from Northern Ireland. So, there was bad things happening, but this was different. This was almost supernatural, that this kind of event. It was shocking enough if you were over the age of 5.5, but to me, I remember not really understanding it, but understanding this sense of kind of fear that I was going to say radiated from Chernobyl, but I was very aware in the news stories when I was watching it that people were grossly concerned and unhappy with what had happened, and the silhouette of Chernobyl Power Station is one that still kind of haunts a part of my mind, especially the silhouette with the old sarcophagus. When you and I hasten to add, we were not tourists when we went to Chernobyl, were we, Russ? We went to Ukraine in 2009? August 2009, I think it was.
Was it?
So I think it was 2009. I've not checked, actually, but I think it was. And we went as an official Ukrainian government-recognized science expedition, rather, not exhibition. That was a Freudian slip, because that was the only way you could get there. You couldn't go as a tourist. You had to go as a science trip. So as far as I'm concerned,
like all science trips, it involved us going into some sort of back office and giving somebody. Do I not remember we had to pay them in US dollars?
It was $85 each. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, we had to pay them in US dollars. I remember that.
Yeah, like all good scientists.
Yeah,
it was like 100 miles north of Ukraine, of Kiev, and there were 3 different checkpoints you have to go through, because it's basically straight road up. But that's why the Russians were so desperate to take it over. It's not because because they really need a dilapidated nuclear power station in their possession. It's not that they're collecting top trumps and they really want Chernobyl because it's the one they haven't got. It's like, no, you get that. It's like you have a straight line down to Kyiv, and they had to pass through all these checkpoints. And I don't know, it was the first 50 miles out, and then there was like 50 kilometers out, and then 30 kilometers, and then 10. I think we stopped, didn't we? Like Chernobyl power station is in Pripyat. It's not, but we stopped in Chernobyl first, which was, for whatever reason it's named after, but it was, I don't know, 10 miles away. And we had lunch. When we eventually kind of started on the journey again, we turned the corner, and there was this iconic sight. It really was, for me personally, and I think for you as well, like quite a moment to see it in real life. This thing that kind of, it takes up an overlarge space in my memory. So yes, I do remember, Russ.
I still, count it among probably one of the most fascinating and interesting and impressive sort of days out I've ever had in my entire life. That day we spent.
I'd agree with that.
The sort of freedom with which we were given to
my God,
wander around Pripyat completely unattended. No, that's not the right word.
Unsupervised.
Unsupervised. That's the word. Yeah, completely unsupervised. Just roaming around, looking around the schools and the supermarket and the theatre and the hotel. And all these different buildings are all sort of ruins with trees and undergrowth growing through them, but still like lots of stuff inside them was still,
Yeah, I mean, they had been to a certain extent kind of trashed and, picked of many, many things, but there was still quite a lot there that kind of made you realise that this was a town that had been completely abandoned. I'm sure a lot of people listening probably have seen the photos online or the videos on YouTube, and I can assure you they do not do it justice. The weird thing is, like, so we had this kind of safety, obviously we're nuclear scientists on a special expedition, but we had this kind of safety lecture, and truly, I'm not lying, the only thing that they were trying to get the fear of God into us is you must not step on the moss.
Yeah, do not step on the moss.
Do not step on the moss, absolutely. Because it was like the moss has absorbed all the radiation. It's not on the concrete anymore or the supermarket. It's all in the moss. You could not touch the moss. Oh, other than that, go on, in you get, guys. Have a laugh. And to the point where, we left the bus and this guy said, yeah, all right, off you go. You got like an hour and a half, like a school trip to the museum. You got like, all right, we'll see you back here in a couple of hours. Yeah. And I think you and I looked at each other like, is that it? What do we do now? We ended up climbing on the roof of the hotel and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have a great photo actually of we're on a veranda on the 6th or 7th floor of the hotel. It's like one of the highest floors, and like there's this beautiful tree growing in this veranda because it's exposed to the elements. And in the background are some kind of mad Soviet tower blocks. It was an astonishing place. I mean, the weather was beautiful. Couldn't recommend it highly enough. But like, you're not wrong. It was an incredible trip. And
I imagine all the tourists have ruined it now, don't they? That's the thing.
That and the giant shed they built over it.
Yeah,
because that was the thing. We at one point we were no more than 200 meters away from it, and you could see the holes. Like you could drive a car through the holes in the sarcophagus that is supposed to be securing this. And I said to you, like if something falls off, like all that radiation, we'll absorb it. It's on us now. I for a long time, I had the shirt I wore there, and it became the shirt I used when we were painting, doing DIY, and I always referred to it as my Chernobyl shirt. And I made sure I gave it a thorough washing when we came home.
The thing I remember wearing that day was for whatever reason I decided to wear a completely brand new pair of leather brogues that I bought off of eBay.
That was the day you broke.
Which I'd never worn before in my entire life.
No.
And they were incredibly uncomfortable to the point that
you had open sores in the back of your feet.
Even before we got from the hotel to the minibus, they'd shredded my ankles down to almost the bone. And then I had to spend the rest of the day wandering around a nuclear site, stepping in all sorts of radioactive powders and dusts.
Yeah.
With gaping wounds on the back of my ankles.
Oh,
it was one of the most bizarre decisions I've ever done in my life. I mean, I've done some pretty weird things.
Quite sweet though. It's like you wanted to dress up smart.
Because I think it might be the case that the only other footwear I had was flip flops, though. That might be.
Oh, yeah, that has to be true.
It's entirely possible.
That has to be true. Yeah, that, and I remember the time we were in the hotel, and I don't know how it happened, but like you kind of walked head first into a girder, an exposed girder that was hanging down the ceiling, and all this plaster just fell down the back of your shirt. And I laughed and I said, oh, somebody's got neck cancer. And then there's one of those things where like a second pass, you get like, actually, no, you should probably quickly wipe yourself down as quickly as possible.
Yeah. The other thing in that hotel was that looking down and seeing a newspaper on the floor.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do remember that.
And we
newspaper.
picked it up.
Yep.
Picked it up, and it was from from the
day of the
25th of
accident.
was it from the 25th or 26th of April 1986, from the day of the accident?
Yes.
It was just laying on
Yeah.
the floor of this hotel.
Oh yeah,
And
that's
you
the thing.
wouldn't let me-
Sorry,
then
the
you wouldn't let me
episode
steal it.
we're watching is from the 1st of May. The accident was from the 25th or 26th. Yeah, no, I wouldn't.
26th, yeah.
I think my response to you, because I still remember, it was like, no, Russell, put that back, because how many people have walked through here and left it there? And and I also in the back of my head, I was thinking like, your bag is the one that's going to beep when you put it through security at the airport.
Yeah,
And they're literally going to
we
get
did
like,
have to go
what is
through
this?
We did have to go through a radiation detector on the way out, didn't we? To make
We
sure
did.
we're not
We
picking
did.
anything up.
Yeah, I was very concerned about you lighting up the room. Probably.
There's also a picture of me. It'd probably get me cancelled if I put it up on the internet these days, of me driving one of the Dodgems in the
Dodgems
fairgrounds.
In Pripyat
Looking like I'm having a whale
yeah.
of a time.
Yeah.
Which is probably, not the done thing these days. But we were younger, didn't realise at the time that it was
We were
such a
respectful,
serious
but,
thing.
it's one of your classic lads trips, isn't it?
Exactly, classic trip to Ukraine. And to be fair, I mean, we didn't just go to Chernobyl, did we?
No, we didn't.
We looked around Kiev itself,
It was lovely.
which I thought was a lovely place.
Yeah, it's somewhere I'm very fond of.
Yeah, I mean, God knows what how much of it is going to end. It's going to be left by the end of this war. But it did seem like a very sturdily built place. All the buildings seemed like massive, didn't they? Like
Yeah,
huge,
they did. Yeah.
huge, hulking, great structures.
Yeah,
and,
very Soviet.
Two specific things I remember was one that people were quite happy to drive down the pavement if they wanted to find a parking space.
Yeah,
Just
they
cars
were,
just
yeah.
coming towards you down the pavement.
On mopeds, yeah.
And two, every market stall we saw in town
Yeah.
was primarily selling memorabilia with the Hugh Laurie character House on it.
Yeah.
Tote bags and posters and things like that. Like, just market stalls just full of that. And we still, to this day, I don't think, have any idea why that was the case.
It was just very popular. A few years later, it became the second most incongruous multiple items that I found at a kind of a flea market or a market in the former Soviet state, because I went to Serbia with some friends, and half the stuff available in Serbia was only Fools and Horses themed. It was a hugely popular show. The other thing I remember about Kiev is we went to a restaurant, and it was in the park. It was in this beautiful park that's kind of southwest of. So when you see kind of Maiden Square on TV, kind of the southwest of that is where like the prime ministers who was it Timoshenko at the time? I don't remember, but like kind of a government district, and then the other side of that there was this park, and in there we found a 1940s 1950s style American diner.
Oh yeah.
And all the food items were connected to the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
And every single dish was Chinese.
Yeah, that classic combo, the old Chinese Rolling Stones diner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you ordered mixed lips, which was maybe chicken fried broccoli. I can't quite remember. And I do think about them every now and then. I don't, because it's one of those things where like I don't know whether that was hugely popular or we were the first people and the only people ever to go in there.
I don't remember there being many people in there while we were in there. But besides that place, I remember eating quite a lot of chicken Kiev.
Yeah, you bloody did. You just wouldn't stop eating
but the
them,
thing is,
no matter how many times I
chicken Kiev-
asked you.
Chicken Kiev is
They were good,
genuinely
though.
one of my favourite foods.
Yeah, they are good.
And as far as I can tell, you can only buy chicken Kiev in Ukraine and UK. You certainly can't buy them here in the Netherlands. So, I mean, all of this reporting from Ukraine has been making me absolutely ravenous for a chicken Kiev every time the city's mentioned.
Do you see Sainsbury's are changing the name now?
Although to be fair, the spelling change to Kyiv has slightly abated that, because it doesn't quite trigger my my garlic butter response as much seeing the word Kiev as it does seeing Kiev. But anyway, so yes, as we mentioned, this episode is from 5 days after the accident.
Yes.
And unusually for Tomorrow's World, well, certainly in our experience, unusually for Tomorrow's World, they actually do talk about it.
Yes, yes.
Other news stories that we've encountered in previous episodes have not really been mentioned at all. I suppose this one has, requisite amount of scientific interest for them to actually talk about it.
Yeah,
so
Thatcher's resignation wasn't quite as scientific as...
But yes, we'll get to that later in the program. So shall we get on with it?
Let's do it.
We might have to start reconfiguring the show, Mark, if you've got nothing to say about the opening titles every episode now.
I feel like every time I say we've talked about this before, there's nothing new to add, a huge sigh of relief is expelled by our listening audience.
Oh yeah, maybe yeah. Keep it in as a little treat for them. One thing I would say is that consistently, I think this is the third episode now that we've seen with what I think we both agree is the classic lineup.
To us, our age, yes.
Of Judith Hann, Howard Stableford, Peter Maccann, and Maggie Philbin.
Yeah.
It's the original lineup that I remember from my childhood.
Yep.
And I don't think it's any coincidence that every episode we've seen with that lineup has been a cracking episode. And this is no exception.
No, not at all. And increasingly, as we've gone on this journey, and you and I have joked about the fact that every time we hear one of the versions of the theme tune, with the exception of like the last few epochs of Tomorrow's World, every time we hear one of the classic theme tunes, we always say like, this might be our favorite theme tune. I feel like I'm close to saying this is the one. This, for me personally, is the classic Tomorrow's World theme tune. Mm-hmm. And this lineup is fantastic. And this program is not without its faults, but this is the quality Tomorrow's World that you and I remember and love.
You could say that these were the A team, and certainly as part of the as far as Tomorrow's World goes. Although that would be confusing, wouldn't it? Because in the context of 1986, calling these the A team would have other meaning.
Well, people would be confused, Russ, because this isn't the A team.
Actually, if the presenters here were the members of the A team, because I mean, your first thought would be that Macann would be Hannibal because he's the older man.
He looks like him.
But then Judith Hann is called Hann, and she's in charge, so she's Judith Hannibal.
But the thing is, Macann. Well, look, Howard is clearly
he could be
face.
He could be Macannibal. Yeah,
goes without saying.
I would say isn't Howard Murdoch because he's the funny one.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. He's Murdoch because he's the funny mad one. Macann can't be B.A. Baracus because he literally won't stop getting on a plane.
Macann, yeah, exactly. But I think Macann's got to be face because he's the smoothest.
Yes. Okay. So Philbin is B.A. Baracus.
Philbin is B.A. Baracus.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on board with this 100%, Russ. I'm in.
She does wear she does occasionally wear chunky jewellery, doesn't she? Also, Mark.
Yes.
Most of B.A. Baracus's outfits are sleeveless.
That's true, actually, yes.
He's usually wearing either a denim ripped sleeve top or some sort of all-in-one thing without sleeves on it. That goes with Philbin, doesn't it? So that's it, yeah.
All right, there we go. You thought there was going to be some kind of debate, but no, this just slots seamlessly.
Anyway, so, sorry, talking of the Tomorrow's World chief, Mr. T impersonator, Maggie Philbin, in all the previous episodes because I normally do a biography of the presenter, and in all the previous episodes with Maggie in them, they've gone a bit long, and I've ended up not including her biography because her biography is quite extensive. Well, there's some good stuff in it. So I thought, let's get it out of the way. Let's do Maggie now. Make sure that she's done. Let's get her covered.
All right, cool. All right, go for it. Tell me about Maggie.
So, she was born on the 23rd of June, 1955 in Leicester, which means she's about 30 in this episode. And she attended Evington Hall, a Roman Catholic grammar school. Another grammar school attendee. Presented Tomorrow's World between 1983 and 1991. She wanted to become a vet when she was a kid at school, right? So she did the following A-levels, English, History, French and German, and studied English and Drama at Manchester University. So I don't know,
Become a vet?
Yeah. So strangely, she wasn't able to
become all creatures great and small, surely.
She wasn't able to become a vet.
Okay.
But while she was at Manchester University, she saw an advert in the stage for presenters for Multicoloured Swap Shop, the legendary Noel Edmonds presented Saturday morning show, alongside Cheggers and John Craven as well. They were on it too, along with her. The thing with Swap Shop, though, is that there's almost no recordings of it in existence because the entire library of it at the BBC was on tape, and they sold the tapes second hand to an Australian TV company to reuse. Gosh. So they got all sent over to Australia and taped over with, I don't know, episodes of Sons and Daughters or something. So there's almost no episodes of Swap Shop exist, apart from ones that people had filmed, like recorded themselves at home. But obviously very few people had video recorders at the time, so not a lot of it about. But what does exist, Mark, and I think you'll enjoy this, is Cheggers, Maggie and Noel formed a supergroup called Brown Sauce. which released a song, a pop song, that managed to reach number 15 in the UK singles charts. Right?
That's a real number.
Yeah. I mean, that's decent for that time. That's quite decent. Isn't it?
That's probably 14 million copies.
This was in 1981. I don't think they're actually playing any of the instruments, but there is a video from Top of the Pops. Which I thought
And up to number 20 this week, here's Brown Sauce and I Wanna Be a Winner.
Don't wanna dance like Fred Astaire, be like Superman through the air. Don't wanna join Claire Francis in the riggings, pop the black with Hurricane Higgins. Don't wanna ride like Willie Carson, be a bishop or an important parson. Don't wanna hit Jeff Buck for Thor, knock my hammer daddy on the floor. I just wanna be a winner, just a little Oscar please. Or a box of oldies. I wouldn't mind if it was no hell. Even Harry would serve me well. See one, feel one, touch one. See one, feel one, touch one. See one, feel one, win an award.
1981. How much cocaine was there in the UK in 1981? I feel like cocaine came to the UK later. So
I would say so.
What kind of built up this level of arrogance in the celeb set in Britain that everyone felt like they had the right to produce a pop hit?
I just feel like the evil guiding hand of Noel is behind all of this. The
Svengali, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it looks like because he's not really adding much to it. He's kind of stinking up the place. I prefer it if he wasn't there. I don't really like the expression on his face.
No.
So I can imagine he's basically pushed poor old Cheggers and Maggie into doing this.
It's almost like he's found out that they've made out behind the BBC bike sheds, and he's threatened to tell Maggie's mum she's stepping out with some kind of renegade. There was an element where I was watching, I was thinking like, because there's clearly Maggie singing, and I'm assuming Cheggers as well. I was like, but they don't look like they're having fun.
I think they're trying to be cool, though, aren't they? They're trying to be cool? I don't know. Could Cheggers and Maggie Philbin be cool?
They could try and be cool.
Jacket. But I just want to draw your attention to the lyrics here, Mark.
Oh, please do.
I managed to find a copy of the lyrics. Because
you managed to find a copy of the lyrics, sorry.
Well, I'll just read them out. Basically, it appears to me what they've done is they've just tried to name celebrities that rhyme either with each other or things.
Okay.
Because I can't, apart from the fact that a lot of them are from the era, I can't really see much connection between any of them. But anyway, here's the lyrics of the two verses, right? First verse. Don't want to dance like Fred Astaire, be like Superman through the air. Don't want to join Claire Francis in the riggings. I had to look up Claire Francis. Turns out she was a champion sailor of the time.
Okay.
Pot the black with Hurricane Higgins. Don't want to ride like Willie Carson. Be a bishop or an important parson. See, clever.
Very good.
Don't want to hit Jeff Boycott for 4. It's interesting connotations knowing what Jeff Boycott said.
He didn't bowl though, did he? He was a batter. Anyway, go on, batsman.
Knock Muhammad Ali on the floor. Right. Second verse. Who'd want to rule like President Reagan?
Oh, no.
Reagan. But purely, I think, because the next line is, or kick a ball like Kevin Keegan.
Oh, that's not good.
Don't want to sit Barbara Woodhouse. Don't want to sit Barbara Woodhouse does that. I'd like to see her try it with the Blue Peter cat. No, I don't know what that means. Now, Penny Keith don't need me at the manor. So that's
Penny Keith. Penelope Keith. Oh my God!
To the manor born.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously, poor old Peter Bowles died.
We just lost him. Yeah.
Rest in peace. I've no desire to marry Diana. And now here comes the final two lines, Mark. They absolutely go out on a real high here, Mark. This is what's that word you used? This is the real peroration of the song.
Peroration, yeah.
Don't even want to paint like Van Gogh. Go nationwide with Frank Bock.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But they want to be a winner, right? Is that the whole point?
Yeah.
So
I want to be a winner, yeah.
But surely
yeah.
they've just listed things that if you did them, you'd be like, if you knocked Muhammad Ali to the floor, you would have won.
No, but they don't want to do that. I think the
No, that's my point. That doesn't make sense.
Well, the idea is that they want to be a winner, but not do any of the things that these famous.
They just want to touch it, feel it. Oh, okay,
undeserved fame and glory.
Okay,
I believe that's the message to the song.
Oh, okay, that's strangely
about it.
Okay. Yeah, like they might be. God, it's a bit more cynical than I expected.
It's a sort of song that Michael Rodd might have come up with.
oh, don't break my heart.
Anyway, so yes, Maggie and Cheggers, obviously a legendary BBC TV power couple for many years. I thought it was quite interesting. Maggie Philbin, she was interviewed after Cheggers sadly died a few years ago, and she described her first meeting with him. Obviously, it was when they were recording an episode of Swap Shop. I first met Keith when we did a film about windsurfing when I joined Swap Shop.
She called him Keith.
In 1978, and was immediately struck by his fun, energy and kindness. He drove me home to Leicestershire from that freezing lake in Staines, insisting it was on his way home. In brackets after this, it says he lived in Twickenham at the time.
Oh, okay.
So that's nice. How romantic's that?
That's really sweet.
They had a child they got married in 1982 and had a child called Rose. And Rose was named after the editor who gave Maggie her job on Swap Shop.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. But they did divorce in 1993.
I remember.
Which was just after Cheggers gave up the booze. I don't know whether there's any connection between those two things.
Oh, it's like Monica and Fun Bobby, isn't it, on Friends?
But yeah, so Philbin turns out is an absolute titan in the world of IT, technology and science education. She's done some presenting after Tomorrow's World, but mostly this kind of stuff. And she runs a charity called Team Tech, which is the umbrella thing under which this all comes. Interestingly, the patron of Team Tech is I don't know what it still is, but according to Wikipedia, was or possibly still is Prince Andrew.
Okay.
But the amount of honorary doctorates she's got and degrees, she's got honorary doctorates and degrees from De Montfort, Queen Mary London, Bath, Huddersfield, Southampton, Leicester, Roehampton and Trinity St David.
Wow.
That's more honorary degrees than any of our other presenters have got.
Yeah.
Computer Weekly consistently puts her in the top 10 women in UK IT.
Really?
She even won it in 2016.
Wow.
She's in their Hall of Fame. And she got an OBE in 2017. She's only one of 3 Tomorrow's World presenters with OBEs. Obviously, Roy Mondo has got one. And Monty Don, who I didn't even know was a Tomorrow's World presenter.
Gosh,
we haven't
that's
got
news to me.
Yet.
No.
So that was the limit of my research, which I did all the way back in episode 2.
You really did. I have to say, I know. It was one of those things where we were sitting down saying, like, we don't have time for this.
Yes. But then...
Can I just say, believe it or not, we do cut stuff out of these episodes.
Well, we used to a much more back then.
That's true.
But then a couple of months ago, it was now, our... what would you call him? Sensei? Our podcasting sensei?
Yes.
Mr. Al Needham for the Chart Music Podcast. He sent me a link.
Godfather.
To a quite extraordinary segment from Blue Peter. Blue Peter, a programme that Maggie Philbin never herself presented.
This is unbelievable. Yeah.
But I'm going to drop this in. If you're listening on the podcast, just type in Blue Peter corsets into YouTube, and it'll be the first thing that comes up.
Make sure you're on incognito mode, obviously.
Yeah. Don't let your mum catch you watching it. Here we go.
Well, after the war, it was back to corsets, but now with much newer and lighter fabrics. And in the 1950s, Christian Dior, the top name in French fashion, designed the corset that Maggie Philbin is wearing.
Yes, not many people realise that the great Christian Dior created corsets, and he designed this one just before he died in 1957. It really was the last word in extravagant luxury, with its velvet trimmings and the lace around the bottom. The velvet covered the steel boning in the corset, which meant that you could wear it next to the skin in complete comfort. There was just one snag with it, and that was that it was so expensive that only the very rich could afford to buy it. And the Christian Dior corset provided the foundation for 1950s outfits like this one.
Well, eventually, Symington's designed cheaper versions of the Christian Dior corset. By now, they'd been one of the world's leading corset manufacturers for well over 100 years. In 1967, they were taken over by the giant Courtaulds Company. But it's amazing to think that nearly all these corsets were manufactured by the same firm, and even more amazing to think that so many of them have been preserved up to the present day. But quite frankly, I'm very glad that we can well do without all this whalebone now. What do you think?
Well, wearing them is one thing, but getting out of them is going to be quite another.
Well, you can do that in private, I think, don't you? What do you think, Isla?
Well, I don't know. They might look quite nice under some of the generation dresses. What do you think, Laura?
Well, I think a very good game for the generation game would be getting out of the corset.
You're right, but would it be the men or the women?
Excellent. Yeah, I agree.
Well, girls, what can we say?
Well, I could say, speaking as an observer, I'm all for corsets. How about you, Peter?
Speechless. I feel I couldn't possibly go home without taking a picture of you daring, delectable dames.
What do we say, girls?
Well, I don't know.
This is for my personal album.
Right then, come on, a really good pose.
Come on, girls, put your heart into it. Come on.
It's very hard when you're held in with one of these, isn't it?
Are you ready? Ready? Oh, right. Instant, look. It comes out straight away.
I'm sure when it does come out, it'll be very well developed. Anyway, my bosom pal, Peter and I, I'm sure we won't forget this programme for a long, long while. But right now, I think we're all busting to go, as it were. So we'll be back on Thursday and we'll be getting the fastest shave in the world.
And we'll be investigating the fastest train.
And I'll be back on Saturday with the rest of the Swap Shop team wearing a few more clothes.
Good. We'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Imagine the fallout that must have had in the playground the next day. I mean, as far as Blue Peter segments go, I mean, it really puts the blue in Blue Peter. What I like about it is it starts out, when it's just the women and the girls there, it's still fairly innocent sort of...
Well, it's educational.
Educational.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
but then as soon as the two bloke presenters come sauntering on screen, it completely changes the whole atmosphere and of the whole segment. Especially Peter Duncan with his with his pink trousers and his camera and his hand in his pocket, just sort of swaggering onto the stage.
It's disgusting. When he comes on, I should say, not least because two of the girls he's lusting over are literally girls.
Takes a photograph for his private collection. But I think Philbin's involved in there because the segment's presented by Sarah Green there at the beginning. But she's completely fully clothed. She I mean, you wouldn't even know that was underwear she's wearing unless she, pointed out. I mean, she's a full set of trousers and a top.
Well, hers is older, so it's much more Victorian,
But my thought is, I mean, why is because Philbin's not a Blue Peter presenter? Is it the case that they basically scanned across the BBC bar and went, right, we need somebody who wants to come on, is going to come on in this outfit. Philbin will do it. Give her a couple of tequilas. It's an extraordinary bit of TV. And when I first showed it to you, Mark, your reply was, "Crikey, no wonder Cheggers went pop." Which,
I remember that.
Which made me laugh.
Sorry.
Good gag.
Sorry,
good
Maggie.
Gag.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Shocking, actually. And because the thing is, it's interesting TV until the lads turn up, and then it becomes one of those things where, should it ever see the light of day, the BBC will have serious problems.
I can just imagine. I'm picturing Peter Duncan now, just roaming the corridors of the BBC with his Polaroid camera, seeing what other photos he can take.
Up until this episode goes live, the most shocking thing that ever happened with Blue Peter was when they lied about naming a cat.
Anyway, right. Had your fill of Philbin?
I'm ready to move on. Well, I'm ready to see her in the show.
Good evening. What's the connection between a brick and a neon sign? Well, to a vandal, it's this. Got it. Introducing the vandal-proof sign. Now, the designers have dispensed with all the plastic and glass that can easily be broken and replaced that with tough aluminium casings. The light sources are tough light-emitting diodes, and they're placed in these small recessed bowls, which helps to reflect as much light as possible. And the fact that the LEDs are recessed means that they're also protected from all sorts of mishaps. It seems to be still working. Now, On top of all this, if you fancy that you ever want to illuminate your fish tank, then that's perfectly all right as well. Since it runs off 12 volts, it's quite safe to handle.
Not for the first time, we open with a segment where the presenter is attempting to destroy something with a brick.
Yes, indeed.
This time we've got Peter Macann in a beautiful beige grey ensemble, hurling half a brick at what he calls a neon sign, but it's definitely not a neon sign.
Nope.
It's like a crap metal sign with a few LEDs in it. Yeah, Macann's knitwear is, I think, becoming a running theme. Is he more often than not worn some sort of pattern knitwear every time we've seen him?
The last time we saw him, he definitely was wearing, I mean, it could be the identical pattern with different colours, but it's the same kind of look, and it's a powerful look. It's the kind of look that only a man like Macann can pull off, really, Russell. It's the confidence and charisma it takes to own that is something else to behold.
It's not interesting enough to add to our audit.
No,
but I will be keeping an eye on Macann's knitwear in future and seeing how many patterns he's got.
It's in our secret sub-order of things that are hover in the background that may become the kind of thing we need to comment on more later on. You're absolutely right.
I do think, though, we might need to start including best clothes in general. Best outfit worn by a presenter in the episode, because there's an absolute crackers in this one. And thinking back, we have commented on what they're wearing quite a few times.
Yeah, we have, because they're amazing. No, and the beauty of you're right. Actually, it's only when I went back and I realised that we had been commenting we've both been talking about the fashions in this particular episode. Mostly because they actually feel like they may even be fashionable. I don't know. That's the weird thing. That's the thing that's all I can't put my finger on. But what I love about the Macann outfit, so you're right, it's this kind of beautiful beige, grey, white ensemble, headlined by this incredible jumper. But for me, the real stars of the show are the incredibly grey leather loafers that he's wearing, the slip-on shoes. And we only get to see them because he stamps up and down on this LED sign. And I, for one, am grateful that he does that, because those shoes are something else.
It is literally the most unlikely outfit that a vandal would wear, isn't it? That is literally the reverse of what a vandal's outfit you would expect it to be. And that sort of, it's like a child having a tantrum when he jumps up and down.
Yeah, it's pathetic.
That side, isn't it? It's utterly pathetic.
Yeah. You'd laugh at it. Like, if you're not the parent, you're going to laugh at that child. Whereas the parent has to pretend to take it seriously.
The invention's rubbish.
Awful.
I quite enjoyed the speed with which he hurls that half brick. Like, it's sudden surprise element that I quite like. I love
how you're clicking your fingers like maybe you're in the jets, Russ. Because like me, you just seen West Side Story recently, and there's some bad guys. And the thing is, at the beginning, he's tossing a brick up, much like the jets might do in the film. And he's throwing it up, and he's throwing it up, and then he really wellies it. I think we both have questions as to whether he actually does throw it because of the way it's edited.
He looks like he's going to absolutely
slaughter it. Yeah,
full pelt.
Yeah.
But we never see the brick leave his hand.
No.
We see a close-up of the sign getting
hit by
the brick.
Yeah.
And it starts wobbling, and then we cut away back to the shot with Macann in it, and that sign is not moving whatsoever.
No, it has not been hit by a brick.
Which doesn't seem like it's been hit by a brick.
No.
Do they really not trust Macann's, athleticism or aim?
Well, I would posit it the other way around, because my feeling was like, when I saw he had the brick in his hand, he was throwing it up, and he was getting ready to throw it, I had a sense of anxiety in me, because I was thinking, like, if that was me, I would be, no pun intended, I'd be bricking it, because there's no way I would be able to hit the target live on TV.
Like when American celebrities go out and throw out the first ball.
Nightmare.
Baseball game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't help that you and I have never thrown a baseball, but but yeah, I mean, it's awful. At least they would have rehearsed that. But like, no, I wonder if maybe Macann himself said, like, hey guys, I'd rather not, miss live on TV. Can we put something else in?
Or maybe they're fearful of the brick bouncing off and like braining someone.
I mean, it could do. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I don't get the impression they're terribly health and safety conscious, to be honest, Russ.
I'll tell you what else they're not conscious about is the welfare of those fish at the end there.
Oh,
so,
that upsets me.
At the end, yes, at the end, he demonstrates the safety of the sign because it's powered by low wattage LEDs. So you can't. It's only it's only a 12-volt battery or something running it. So it's immersed in a tank of goldfish. Which he very playfully and quite camply wafts his hand in.
Yeah.
But the water is absolutely disgusting.
Filthy, fecund water. Yeah, disgusting.
If they just carried that out of, I know it's probably in like the cafeteria or something, isn't it, or the reception?
Oh, yeah,
and they've just lugged it up without even bothering to clean the tank out.
It's really weird. And the other thing is like the fish, as relaxed as they look in close up, they are all cowering in the furthest edge of the tank from where Peter's hand is going to go in. It's like whether they have a 3-second memory or not, these guys remember rehearsal and they remember this hand wafting this filthy water through its greying fingers, and they want nothing to do with it.
No,
I don't blame them.
No. The invention itself is pretty crap, isn't it? Like,
it's an awful sign.
I don't really, because LEDs, they've been around since the early 60s. So that's not an invention. And metal signs, they've been around for longer than that. So that's not an invention. So a metal sign with some LEDs in it, to me, is that really an invention? Especially as it's not a very good sign. Like, you can't read it.
No, because it's for those who are listening to describe it, it's the current Tomorrow's World logo, which you'll remember is the word Tomorrow's World, and there's kind of a strange, it's kind of the globe one, but it's a shape. What is it? It's kind of like
Hackney Council logo.
Yeah, it's the Hackney Council. It's the Hackney Council Death Star. Look it up, guys. Look up there, Hackney. Well, also, or you can just look up this logo. And but it's the words Tomorrow's World, which would be the obvious thing to have lit up in LEDs, are not. Whereas the kind of affected globe shape, which is kind of the two hemispheres and the lines that meet the text, they're lit up, but they're not even lit up in blue or white, which is either of the two tones used in the logo. They're lit up in red. It's awful. I half expected you to tell me that this is because LEDs had just been invented, but I knew that wasn't true. So
LEDs were invented in the 60s.
Yeah. So I was trying to work out what...
It's almost certainly the case that you wouldn't be able to get blue LEDs back then, though, because blue
in the 60s or in the 80s?
No, in the 80s. Blue and white LEDs are reasonably
difficult,
more modern inventions.
That's interesting.
So that's probably why I was relying on the red ones there. But then you think, well, what if you want an indestructible sign? Just have a reflective metal sign and illuminate it from the exterior, which is what they do with road signs.
Yes, true.
Like,
yeah.
That's fine. And so, it's like a matrix of LEDs, but the matrix of LEDs is not nearly tight enough for it to really portray anything complicated. So it doesn't really have much use, as far as I can tell, really.
Also, he does refer to it as a neon sign, and because I did ask the question, it's almost like was a neon sign a kind of a catch-all term for any sign that lit up, regardless of how it was lit up? Because that's how it feels. Because it's not.
It shouldn't be, because neon signs are very specific.
It's very specific. Yeah, absolutely. It has its own. There's a reason people now buy it as art for their homes, because it has a really fabulous, amazing look and feel to it, and especially if it's actually authentic neon as well. It was like I was surprised that he called it. I don't know. It's just, hey, this is how we start the show. A show, by the way, we said we've loved, but this is how we start. Thank God it's short.
I still enjoyed him chucking the brick, but
if he did,
I would say I searched what is the future of advertising signage to see what is the future of advertising signage, and it is LEDs. But it's micro LEDs, so that's the big. But it's not just it's like all screens,
micro LEDs.
All screens. The next big thing in screens, which is both advertising screens and television and everything, is micro LEDs, which, as you might imagine by the name, Mark, are very, very tiny
ones?
LEDs. But the good thing is they're like, so they're little. Each LED represents a pixel.
Yeah.
So they're that small. There's actually 3 different coloured LEDs on there. So there's like a red, green, and blue one, and each one of those represents a pixel. But the good thing about that is that because they're so small, so on a normal television, depending on the size of the screen changes the size of the pixel. But with a micro LED, the pixel size never changes. So the bigger the screen, the bigger the resolution. So you can just bolt on more and more screens, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and higher and higher and higher resolution. And because they're LEDs don't use very much power, so they're really low power and they're brighter. So at the moment, the biggest one, and like the own, like LG will do them, but they cost an absolute fortune. But you can get a 393-inch 8K micro LED screen, and it'll cost you $1.7 million.
Okay.
So
yep, that's a lot.
Don't chuck a brick at that.
No.
But the point is that they're very flexible, and because you can just put these pixels anywhere in any arrangement, they can be great for advertising because you make them any shape and size, whatever, and bolt new bits on and things like that. So once they've got the cost down, all of our advertising screens will be that. But presumably they'll put some sort of like plastic in front of them so that people don't chuck bricks down, rather than this crappy option.
I like how brick protection is the thing you're taking away from this particular segment.
Well, not much else you can take away from
No.
Let's see what else is coming up, shall we?
Those fish are dead now. Yes.
And later in the show tonight, Peter goes to see the boat in which he hopes to cross the Atlantic in record time. And there's also news of an intriguing theory which may explain the cause of at least some cot deaths, and how holes in the earth could drain off the level of the rising sea. But first, Howard, who's making a bit of a splash again.
It's not uncommon these days for helicopters operating in the North Sea to be doing 600-mile round trips. And if a serious fault occurs, which can happen from time to time, there's only one thing you can do. Ditch! Helicopters are top heavy. Unfortunately, tend to do that sort of thing. Now, imagine that it was 100 miles out at sea, and knowing my luck, there'd be a storm and it'd be at night. Well, the last thing I want is any more problems. I'm shocked. I could possibly be injured. I'm certainly exhausted, and I'm totally disorientated. But this is exactly where my problems could begin. Once in a blue moon, these conventional life rafts inflate upside down, or they flip over without their full complement of people. But if I was wet and bedraggled out in the North Sea, I'm not sure that I wouldn't make heavy weather of it. And then there's always a problem of getting into the thing. And believe you me, that's not easy either. Reach in here. While all this has been going on, if the others haven't been concentrating, then I could be 100 yards away from the helicopter by now, because this canopy acts like a sail, and dragging the whole thing back will be virtually impossible. Well, not surprisingly, therefore, everybody concerned has been hoping that someone would come up with something better. Well, this is the heli raft, and the base here looks as though it should sit on the bottom, but it sit on the water, but it won't, because it isn't the bottom. This is a two-sided raft, and the base, the floor, is actually the centre line of the donut of the flotation chamber. The underside is a mirror image of the top side. So if in fact it does flip over, you can just clamber into it because it's always the right side up.
It's just occurred to me, Mark, this is the first of two Howard segments involving being stranded at sea. What's the international recognised distress signal if you're on a radio?
SOS?
It's Mayday, isn't it? Mayday.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Oh, I see. This is the 1st of May.
What date is this?
Yeah.
1st of May.
1st of May, yeah.
Coincidence,
yeah.
Mark?
Yes.
Is it? You don't think they saved up their lifeboat segment for May?
Well, here's the thing. It's like, because both of you and I have the same feeling about this, which is, I think if you were born or you grew up in the 1980s and 1990s, I'm not sure a week went by without seeing a TV presenter in a giant pool testing out life rafts or doing some kind of air stewardess training program where they go down fake planes. And not a week would go by, almost to the point where I almost texted you a couple of days ago thinking, like, do you think half of TV Centre was trained up as air stewards so the government had scabs in case BA went on strike? Is that what they were doing? Because there's no other reason. So I think it's just purely coincidental, because frankly, I wouldn't be shocked if Macann was in a giant pool 2 weeks previously.
Yeah, that's something that specifically to me, that thing that he does here, which I found out is called a Huet helicopter underwater escape training, where they have a fake helicopter suspended over a swimming pool.
Yeah.
They're all strapped in it and they dunk them.
Yeah.
And they spin the helicopter over.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that so many times on TV.
Yeah.
And as you know, Mark, the listener may not, I have a horrendous fear of being underwater.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd always find it deeply unpleasant seeing these poor old presenters getting dunked like this. But yeah, I don't understand why it was on so many. I mean, I can't even remember what TV programs it was on, but I just remember seeing it so many times. I think it is probably the one thing standing in between us getting this oil rig, Mark, is that I won't be able to pass this test that apparently
I got worried about this now.
I suppose I could just have to sail out there in my speedboat instead, and then that'll be all right.
True, but you might still need to get into a life raft if something happens to the oil rig, because apparently for most of the time it's going to be manned just by me.
Howard doesn't look like he enjoys it either, does he? Like he gets that full dunking and he comes popping out, and he's wearing a very sort of highly inflated vest, and he's got all this rubber around his mush, which is sort of pushing his cheeks out.
He's like an orange Bibendon, and it looks and sounds exhausting. I mean, I have to say, he really struggles, and not because he's not athletic, just because like the outfit that, obviously this outfit he's in is a life preserver. Like, it's keeping him alive, but at the same time, it's preventing him from doing anything else other than float in the water.
But he still manages to maintain that classic Howard chirpiness in his voice. Though.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Ever the professional. But and then this life raft is inflated, and Howard clambers in the life raft. I've always actually quite liked the look of those life rafts. There's something weirdly...
No, I agree.
I know they're definitely not cozy in real life, but there's something weirdly cozy looking about them, because they have those little roofs, and they're kind of like little tents on the ocean sort of thing.
Depending how much you leave in or out, because we see two life rafts. We see one which is the standard current edition life raft, in which, 1 time out of 10, I'm guessing, like it's supposed to only inflate the right way up, and it is designed so that you have a base, you have kind of 2 rubber rings, and then you have a kind of a tent awning that you can kind of pull over yourself and create a little roof, and that's what makes it look kind of cozy, even though, as you rightly point out, it probably would not be. And he's now showing you this new life raft, which takes away the problem. Because actually, one thing he demonstrates, which also looks exhausting, is him rewriting an inflated life raft, where it's like there's a strap, and he's kind of in the water, and he's pulling it and pulling it and pulling it. There is secretly another person in the pool who's helping him out. And I don't know whether we are or are not supposed to see them, or realize that actually maybe it's a 2-man job. But heroically, Howard is trying to impress upon us that it's a 1-man job that only he can do. But he rewrites it, whereas this new one is symmetrical. It's mirrored. It's, it doesn't matter which way up it is. It'll help you live. Frustratingly, this whole segment becomes a bit of a bit, and not frustratingly. I'll get there in a minute, but it's like it's nicely done. Like he says, knowing my luck, it'll be nighttime, it'll be raining, and they cut the lights, and then they start spraying them with water, and it's quite nicely done. Which I wondered, is that a nod to the fact that even the BBC now are bored of broadcasting presenters in pools, so they have to spice it up with something. But you see the guys in the life raft, and they start pulling up the awning, and I was like, that was the bit I wanted to understand more. Was because if it is symmetrical, like, are there 2 tent bits, or is it the one tent bit in the middle? And depending on which way up, you can put. I wanted to see them make it. I wanted to understand how that worked, but we never find out.
This new one was much more confusing looking. It looked like they were actually folding the actual edges.
Yes, it did, because he talks about how the edges are,
because it'd be too rigid.
Yeah, I really wanted to understand that, and they don't explain it at all. Or even refer to it. They just do it whilst they're kind of enjoying this cinematic, the wave machine is going, and it's obviously clearly much more realistic. And the fact that they're able to close the tent above them. But it's like, I didn't understand how it worked. Because again, he talks about how the edge of the life raft is now basically protective, so that like this, it won't burst if like you accidentally drop a knife on it. But then where the hell does this tent bit come from? Because they seem to pull it from the outside and bring it over. I don't know. I found that a bit annoying.
Yeah.
But then I don't suppose Howard or the BBC team were creating a piece for you and I because we enjoy how cozy these things look.
No. Do you want to know
Ooh.
about this life raft? Because I don't know whether you noticed, Mark, but there's, I think, some pretty shameless product placement here. This life raft only has the name of the company printed on only. It's a hexagonal. Is it hexagonal? Pentagonal?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Octagonal.
Octagonal.
But only one of these sides has the name of the company printed on it. And it just happens to be the side that we suddenly see in a lovely top-down view from Howard talking about as he talks about what it's made of and all that. So we get a full view that it's made by RFD Aviation. So I looked them up, Mark.
Please do tell.
Turns out that they are the absolute leaders in such rafts. And this is called the RFD Heli Raft. Is actually, it's still in use to this day.
Good.
And is the market leader in helicopter life rafts. But what's interesting is that I found a study some expert in life rafts had done in the 1998. And it's a man called C.J. Brooks did this. And the paper was called The Abysmal Performance of the Inflatable Life Raft in Helicopter Ditchings.
Oh, gosh.
He'd done a study of he got all of the details of all of the helicopter ditchings that had ever happened and what happened to the life rafts. And it turns out they were all invariably awful, invariably useless, and because they'd store them in the wrong places and they wouldn't be able to deploy them, or they'd all just float away, or people didn't know how to deploy them properly. So he's absolutely disgusted, basically, by the state of the life raft industry. He's essentially disgusted by it. However, he does point to some tests that were done with the RFD heli raft versus a normal life raft. And he says that the RFD heli raft is definitely better.
Okay.
It has many distinct advantages. So he recommends people use those instead of the regular ones.
I don't suppose you get to choose when you get in a helicopter, do you?
Well, this is he said that a lot of the problem was with a lot of people running these helicopters their last consideration is what rafts are sticking them.
Crikey.
Because they just don't even think about the idea that a helicopter's going to crash. So they just put in whatever cheapo ones they can get hold of. And this is what causes all the trouble. But you get one of these RFD heli rafts for $10,000 if you want one.
Oh, okay. That's pricier than I thought, but it did look good. $10,000.
Are they single use only? Do you think? Or do you think you can put them back in?
Oh, would you want to deflate them and put them back in the bag? I wouldn't.
No, but so that's pretty much it for life rafts. Anything else to say? No, apart from the fact that obviously this is clearly, although it's not mentioned, this is clearly an oil rig segment, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's like, helicopters do 600-mile round trips
into the North Sea.
Why? Oil rigs. It's not because of all the incredible tourism. No, this is absolutely about oil rigs. So that I was studiously taking notes for our inevitable construction project. Because safety is important, Russ. I want our oil rig to be safe.
Well, let's make sure we get RFD heli rafts. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, okay. What if we get a discount for this advertising we've done?
And get some scatter cushions as well to make them nice and extra cosy.
Yeah, good. And some kind of, incense burner.
Wonder if he understands Morse code. Anyway, I can tell you that he's far from home and dry, as we shall find out later in the programme. But sending messages by light is hardly a new idea, but early versions did have their limitations, the fog being just one of them. But today, optical fibres, on land at least, have absolutely revolutionised the development of processed information. They can carry light signals for miles. But even the best fibres do eventually lose light and the signal decays. You can see here how the light is fading as the cable winds further around the drum. So every 30 miles or so, the signal has to be boosted using electrical repeaters like these, where the fading light comes in at one end, is amplified, and then sent on out the other. But the process involves converting the light to electricity in order to amplify it, and then converting it back into light using another laser. It is an efficient, if complicated system, but even so, up to half the signal can get lost in the conversion. But now a research team from Southampton have developed a completely new type of fibre which could do away with boosters like these. Now, it might look just like an ordinary optic fibre, but this is actually a laser as well.
You know, Mark, there was that, I don't know whether you're on Twitter, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
There's a big thing recently, wasn't there, on Twitter? Are there more doors in the world, or are there more wheels in the world?
I did see that, yeah.
I was wondering whether we could do our own Tomorrow's World thing. Are there more mentions of lasers, or are there more mentions of magnets? Because I reckon it's got to be a toss-up between the two of them, isn't it? They are basically, everything is either a laser or a magnet, isn't it?
Oh, no, that is definitely something we can add to our audit. More mentions of lasers or magnets? That's a really good question, Russ. Well, at one point he talks about lasing fibre or something like that, which it's a term I've never heard of. Yeah. Oh, no, that's a good one.
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, you know, everything with a laser in it is always somewhat exciting, isn't it, Mark?
Yes.
Even though I mean, it's not that his explanation is necessarily hard to follow. It's just that I had no concept of the idea that, like, a material in itself could be a laser. Do you know what I mean? Like, because he's literally saying that this fibre itself that he has here is a laser.
Yeah.
So because in my mind, a laser is like a complicated piece of electronics that produces a light.
Yes.
But apparently that's not necessarily the case. You can just have a material which is in itself a laser.
So let's start at the beginning then, because he explains how he doesn't call them fiber optics, does he? He calls them optic fibers.
Optical fibers.
Optical
yes,
fibers.
Yeah.
So optical fibers, obviously, they can send this laser 30 miles roughly, and then the signal has to be boosted. And in order for that to happen, it has to go through this kind of this kind of machine, which is what, like a meter long, and it looks like a model actually of a small tunnel boring machine.
Yes.
Yeah, and so the cable goes in one end. It takes the light, turns it into magic powder, and then basically, you know, it boosts the image by turning it into an electric signal, and then the electric signal is then returned back into a laser beam, which then sends the light down the next 30 miles. And to demonstrate that, he shows us this optical fiber rolled, wrapped round, like to my mind, what looked like a giant bobbin, like a proper reel of thread from a sewing kit. Though interestingly, and maybe it is the lighting in the studio, from my mind, because I don't know, it must be wrapped around 100 times around this bobbin, but clearly there's no light after the second or third wrap. It's like the idea that this goes 30 miles is nonsense. He also says that this boosting setup as it exists at the moment is efficient but complicated, only to continue on and explain that actually up to 50% of the signal can get lost in the conversion, which to my mind is inefficient. So that all makes sense though. There's the idea that, you have this fiber optic cable and, you know, something is getting sent down it, but it can only go so far, so you have to have the signal boosted through some kind of mechanism. I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it does, you know. He explains it moderately well, though unusually for Macann. It's quite a clumsy performance from him.
He makes a number of unforced errors.
He does, yeah, which is a lovely term to describe what happens. And it feels really unrehearsed or under-rehearsed.
Upon this watching of it, I started to wonder. So the very, very first part of the segment opens with a nice little bit of business where he's pretending to be on the tower of a ship.
Yes.
Flashing a lamp doing Morse code.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't read Morse code, so I can't tell whether he's like, you know, saying anything rude about Howard or something like that. But they also, for added sort of authenticity, they blast a bit of fog across the stage.
Entirely unnecessarily. Yeah.
But I was wondering while I was watching, maybe the fog came across and blocked his auto cue. That's why he stumbles so much. He's got fog on the auto cue.
You're being very sweet and generous there, Russell. No, I just think it's really under-rehearsed. Though I do like whether it's deliberate or not, I do like the idea that, you know, at the beginning of the segment, it was the way that light conveyed information in the past, and now this is how light conveys information now, as well as linking it to Howard's on the Sea.
It's a lovely little segue.
It was really nice. It's a shame that he's slightly mush-mouthed throughout. But then, so he explains how you know, what happens in the moment, but then he goes on to talk about, well, we have this new thing, this lasing material, did he call it, something like that? And basically, it seems to promise an exponential growth of the light signal. And I
Yes.
think both you and I must have had the same image in our mind in which, you shine a torch down a fiber optic cable and then at the other end blasts a nuclear explosion of pure white light, like something like that, like what it must have been like to stand in the Trinity Proving Ground, when Oppenheimer pressed the button or something like that, And all you want to do is watch NTL because, Bo Select is on at 9. But the thing is, like, they explain what happens.
Very specific reference.
Yeah, okay, that was for you. They explain what happens, but not in any way do they explain how it happens, or what's there must be like the idea that they've created material that kind of so the idea is like one light photon hits something and creates two, and then those two hit two other things and they create 4 photons, and so on and so forth.
That is what. So what he says. Once I'd read around it, what he says makes sense. But it is, I think it's quite hard, unless you know what this, and know much about this kind of thing, it's quite hard to even get your head around the idea that you can, magnify the light. So, I mean, just almost passively magnify the light. But apparently that's what this stuff does. Not only do they exist, Mark, they are the very backbone of the internet. Without this stuff, this is, we like to have one invention per episode that turns out to be the big game changer.
Yeah, ideally.
It's this.
Wow.
Without this, we would not have the internet as we know it.
We wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now.
No. So Southampton, although Southampton didn't invent fibre optics, I think they were invented by an American person. Southampton is very much the sort of one of the pioneers of new fibre optic technology, and as he mentions, they're the ones. Southampton University came up with this. But what it is, so it's the same glass that normal fibre optics are made out of, but then they dope the glass with rare metals, and there's various rare metals you can put in there. Hang on, I wrote some of them down. Such famous elements, Mark, as get your periodic table out here and check them off. There's erbium, ytterbium, neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium, thulium, and holmium. All the old family favourites. But yeah, so they're like impregnated. Those little atoms are impregnated in the glass, and they're the things that he was talking about, where the photons hit them, and then more photons come out of them than went in. Which is what is magnifying the light beam. But the key with it is they only put a little short segment in it.
Yes.
Every so often. So that's why they don't end up with the thing that we were worrying about it,
Yeah.
It's frying at the other end of the cable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the first brought out one with neodymium in it, which I think is probably this one.
I have to say, I don't remember any of these in that Tom Lehrer song.
I mean, even he'd struggle getting a rhyme for praseodymium, wouldn't he? Yeah. But that immediately revolutionised telecom and cable stuff. And then they came up with another one in 1993 that had erbium and ytterbium in it. And basically, this is the one that made this one that enabled massive long distances to be covered. And there's something about the fibre optics that enable huge amounts of information to be passed down them, and very high powered signals, which is kind of what's necessary for the high bandwidth that you need for video distribution. So the very fact that I'm talking to you here on Zoom, and the very fact that I'm playing this recording of Tomorrow's World to you is down to this erbium dipped fibre optic laser.
Yeah. What a horrific misuse of an incredible technology.
So it really couldn't be more important, Mark. Yeah. But the other thing is that going back to our fear about it being some sort of laser gun, turns out, Mark, because these fibres can carry quite a lot of power, and they've got a very, when it's got a big surface area to its volume.
Yes.
Which means they can carry a lot of power, but then you can also glue them together. So laser cutters that you use to cut sheet metal and things like that, or engraved metal or glass or whatever, those are made with this same thing, but they just have the end cut off, so it's just firing a high-powered laser out of it. But you can continue to bundle them together until you get a super death cannon laser gun.
Brilliant.
And that's what the world's military are doing at the moment.
Oh, thank God.
So
we weren't wrong.
So all of the various death rays and lasers and that the people like Lockheed Martin are developing, are all based on this technology. So they currently got one that's 50 kilowatts, which can blast a drone out of the sky. But the US government reckon they can, by the end of 2023, they'll have one that's 300 kilowatts.
Well, you have to have ambition,
which
don't
could,
you?
you know, melt a tank or whatever.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Lockheed Martin are well behind it. They've got like a whole video explaining. What does it say? The video's called "The Time for Laser Weapons Has Come." Which I mean, just in time for World War III.
Yeah,
really.
no. I mean, they're not wrong. Yeah.
But the good thing is that running one of these lasers is remarkably cheap. So if you want to, currently, if you want to blow a drone out of the sky, you've got to probably launch something like a Patriot missile at it.
Mm-hmm.
Each Patriot missile costs $2 million.
Oh.
You fire one of these bad boys at it, it'll cost you about $1 in electricity.
Oh.
So the taxpayer savings are enormous. Mark.
Yeah.
We should be welcoming this new,
We should be welcoming our laser overlords. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Totally. But yeah, so very exciting little invention, this one, Mark.
I'm moderately relieved as well that our initial thoughts were spot on the money. Brilliant. Next.
Behold the sea indeed. According to a recent paper in the science journal Nature, we're not beholding it enough. This is the Isle of Wight, and it owes its existence to the fact that worldwide the sea level is gradually rising. Turn the clock back 10,000 years and the island didn't exist. There was just a river flowing where the Solent now is, and a continuous band of chalk stretched from here right across to where the Needles are now. Since then, the glaciers that used to cover the whole of Britain have melted because the earth has been getting warmer. The sea level has risen, and in consequence, behold the Isle of Wight. But it won't stop there. The sea is still rising by 1 millimetre a decade. Now, that might not sound much, but if the trends in the greenhouse effect continue and the increased carbon dioxide we're creating warms the atmosphere even further, the sea level could rise 10 feet by the middle of the next century. So, what would that mean to Britain? Well, all Fenland gone. The entire complex of Humberside and Teesside has been drowned, and it's man the pumps time for all our industrial river complexes. Incidentally, Sellafield and nuclear power stations around the coast could be in deep trouble. The Thames Barrier is an island, and 800,000 EastEnders have taken to the life rafts. But don't reach for the paddles just yet. Enter to the rescue, of all people, the Thames Water Board and similar organisations worldwide. According to Russian studies, reservoirs and irrigation schemes around the world have already prevented 8,000 cubic miles of river water from reaching the oceans, and this has caused a 26-year lag in the amount the sea level would otherwise have risen. The Russians have been thinking for some time of diverting Siberian rivers like the Ob south to the Caspian and Arab seas. Not only would the scheme irrigate desert land for farming, raising the Caspian level by 10 metres, it would, at a stroke, hold back 8 years of sea level rise. And here's a major American study that shows us how to stem the rising tide. Because doctors Newman and Fairbridge, writing in here in Nature, have plans for all those parts of the world that lie below sea level. Now, the Dead Sea is perhaps the best known example, but there are plenty of others. The Qattara Depression in Egypt, for example, and the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia. These are close enough to the sea to allow 600 cubic miles of ocean in each case to be drained inland through pipes. And that, of course, could also generate a lot of electricity. And Lake Erie over here in Australia would swallow even more. And then there's the Imperial Valley and Death Valley over in California. By draining the oceans into all of these, we could keep the sea level steady for decades to come.
There was one thing going through my mind throughout that segment, Mark, and that was, where's Climcon when you need it?
afraid that's way off into the distant future, Russ.
The boffins at ClimCon would have this sorted overnight, Mark. Honestly, I do think that segment was very reminiscent of episode 10, where they were making up stuff, because the whole thing came across as just unmitigated cobblers, didn't it? Like, it's ridiculous. The idea that you can stop the sea level rising due to climate change by just siphoning off the sea and hiding it on land.
That's it. That's the way of putting it. Hiding it on land. Like the sea won't notice.
Like the reverse of sweeping something under the carpet. I'm sweeping the
exactly
water
right.
onto the...
Yeah.
It's so absurd.
Basically, you're submerging part of the earth in order to stop part of the earth being submerged.
Yeah, exactly. And it's given quite a hefty amount of screen time.
Yeah,
in this
it's
episode.
shocking, isn't it?
I mean, the segment starts with some entirely unnecessary chat about the Isle of Wight.
Ugh.
I don't know. Is that because they think that's the only... They need to bring it... They need to show us something close to home.
100%. That's a really patronising way of getting the audience to connect to this issue. Though, as I said to you, it's like one of the examples they give later on, they talk about the Thames flood barrier. And as I said to you, it's like, why do we have a Thames flood barrier? So why do you think they spent... It's an engineering marvel. Why, Judith, why do you think it's there? Because flooding is a very real issue in London, especially in the East London as well, just talk about that. But yet she goes in this long spiel about how, like, the gift of rising sea levels is the Isle of Wight. And now I've been to the Isle of Wight and it was lovely. You get a hovercraft to the Isle of Wight, Russ, and I went to a friend's wedding and it was just a delight. It is a really odd place, like it's slightly odd.
Yeah,
but it is lovely.
We went family holiday to the Isle of Wight when I was younger, back in the would have been the late 80s, I would have thought.
So therefore, it's like you're going on holiday to the 60s, I'm sure.
Went to Blackgang Chine, which I believe is the Isle of Wight's principal tourist attraction.
I've never heard of
as far as I know, the Isle of Wight has two main tourist attractions. It has a beach where you can get multicoloured sand, which, if it's raining, just all looks the same colour, which is when we went.
That sounds like personal experience.
And a place called Blackgang Chine, which is sort of like a weird garden with lots of gnomes and lights and windmills and stuff in it, which everyone goes to.
There's also Osborne House as well.
But we came out of Blackgang Chine in the evening, and our car had been stolen, Mark. It's the only time...
Get out.
Only time I heard I had a car stolen in my family.
On the Isle of Wight?
That I remember. Well, but the good thing was, we were on the Isle of Wight. We were on the Isle of Wight. So next morning, police found it. It hadn't made its way off the island at all.
That's astonishing. Why would
so
you
we got
do
it back.
That? Brilliant. It's probably a joyride on the steel. Okay, well, there you go. I mean, is that worth the rising sea levels? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's a point. Yeah, without that glacier melting, our car could have been halfway, Scotland.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what I mean. Maybe that is worth it. Maybe there is. Maybe Judith was onto something. It's so weird. And the odd thing is, like, the map they use looks like kind of a high level geologist map of, like, the different strata. It's like, it is so difficult to discern. And they have this blue arrow that keeps on pointing to things, but they're not highlighting anything. It's just really odd.
I think they definitely cribbed that from
something,
either a
open
schools
university?
or an open university program.
It was on hand, wasn't it?
And thought it was good enough to illustrate what she's talking about on screen quick enough for us not to ask questions about all the extra detail on it. I think
because this is a real serious issue. And the thing is, like, it felt slightly patronising that they had to start with this way in for, like, the domestic audience, when really, like, bearing in mind the Thames Barrier to me is genuinely a way in, and she later on shows this kind of satellite map of East England, which again is incredibly difficult to decipher because it's not it's not a photo. It's some kind of weird.
Why was it loads of purple and pink dots?
I don't know. Again, it felt like a geologist map that, again, they must have cribbed from the same OU program. And there's no indication of, like, towns or city centres or population centres to give you an idea of, like, oh, well, actually, in the next segment they talk about Lowestoft. Well, maybe Lowestoft doesn't exist. What an interesting thing to talk about.
It could have been like a cross-segment of somebody's kidney or something, as far as I could tell. I mean, it didn't even look like a map.
Without the incredible soundtrack that we're familiar with when we look at cross-sections of kidneys. I don't know, just 'cause the thing is, like, you really shouldn't be able to struggle to explain to people the impact of rising sea levels by talking about the places that will just vanish. And, Bangladesh always comes to mind, and there are those Pacific islands that will just go. To me, this is the most frustrating segment. There are bits where I was more frustrated later on with specific elements of segments, but this is the one that just really annoyed me, because this is quite a serious subject. And I think they whiff it. Not least because the solutions, quote unquote, are swivel-eyed nonsense.
And I think even to them it is, because it ends with her saying it's not going to happen.
Well, except that she seems kind of dispirited that no one's done anything to do it. Like, it's not like, oh, well, of course it's nonsense, but we'll find a solution. It's more like, these countries, they haven't even done these things yet. It's like, yeah, of course they bloody haven't. You think the US government, the federal government's going to fill Death Valley with seawater? How are you going to get it there, Judith? Is everyone going to have to turn up and pitch in and bring a carrier bag? No, you're going to have to pump it there. So what kind of infrastructure does it require to pump Death Valley full of seawater? And the thing that popped into my mind after because you mentioned, like, actually that would have a really devastating impact on the local climate. But the other thing is, like, there's something called the water cycle, isn't it? So that water evaporates, right? Not least because Death Valley is famously hot. That water evaporates, and then it gets dissipated in the atmosphere. It ends up in the sea. Like, what are you supposed to do? So now you're having to roof Death Valley in order to keep all that water in.
I would say two positives of this. Lovely opening bit of music there.
Yes, fabulous. Is it Vaughan Williams, isn't that right?
Ralph Vaughan Williams, yep. Behold the Sea Itself from A Sea Symphony. Over the top of what initially looks like the opening titles to Father Ted.
Yeah.
As he's going over a sun,
glistening.
A very reflective Solent. The other thing I liked was this absolutely vast globe that she's standing next to for part of it, which has got all of the... It looks like it's been painted so that what would happen once the sea levels have risen, because the top of Africa's all underwater.
And Australia's a weird shape.
I don't know where she got this globe from.
Open University, I'm guessing. You're not wrong. Yeah, it's a very odd thing.
But other than that, I think we all know how this went, don't we, Mark?
We do. We solved the problem, and it's gone away now.
Yeah. Well, I did try finding. There we go. Newman and Fairbridge that she mentions, and I did find their paper in Nature. Unfortunately, it was behind a paywall, which I couldn't get through. So
you could have paid.
Shut up.
Sorry.
Still paying off these microphones, Mark. I can't be shelling out for spurious academic papers. However, sea level rise. So they reckon, scientists in general reckon, that the sea level rose between 1901 and 2018. The sea level rose on average between 15 and 20 centimetres, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, as time has gone by and we've got more carbon dioxide, greenhouse effect has gone up, and it's getting faster and faster and faster. So now they currently reckon it's at a rate of 3.7 millimetres a year.
Not 1 millimetre a decade.
And Judy said it was 1 millimetre a year back then.
Oh, was it a year?
I think she was underestimating there slightly.
That makes sense.
I think it was about 1.6 back then. So they reckon that. Well, they keep doing estimates. The IPCC, all the boffins, looking into this, and they estimate that. Well, they originally thought it would raise by about 60 centimetres by the end of this century, which is quite a lot. But now their high-end estimate is 90 centimetres, which is even more. But the weird thing is, Judith, I don't know whether you remember, in this, she says that the sea level may rise by 10 feet.
Which is,
this century.
3 and a bit metres. She did say that. Yeah. You're absolutely right. She did say that. Yeah.
Which is way above even their estimates.
You're right.
Now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know where she got that from.
Yeah.
Because not even the wildest calculations, suggest that that's going to be that much. So obviously not being able to get the Newman and Fairbridge paper, I then just typed in, could we lower sea levels by flooding things? And I found a good article where basically they just asked loads of different experts in different fields, would this be possible?
Literally in fields, I'm guessing.
And the sort of the level of disbelief and contempt about over the question is palpable. Everyone thinks it's an absolutely absurd idea.
Of course it is.
One of them pointed out that the amount of ocean, there's 3 times more ocean than land in the world. So even a basic calculation, if you want to lower the sea by 1 foot, you would have to cover the entire land surface of the Earth in 3 feet of water.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
another bloke like sort of calculated the volume of the oceans all put together is 1.3 billion cubic kilometres, right? It's quite a lot,
That
isn't
says
it?
a lot, yeah.
And there's hard, I mean, even if you add up Death Valley and all of these other places, Dead Sea and all these other places she suggested, it's a tiny, tiny fraction of what the oceans are. And one bloke tried to calculate it, and he reckons that even if you flooded every available sort of depression that didn't have many people in it, you would still only account for 3 centimetres of the ocean. So which is obviously way below.
That's less than a decade's worth of...
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
yeah.
Judith does mention at one point that it could be used to generate power. This bloke did say, yes, you could feasibly pumping seawater from a high point to a low point. You could use it to generate power. That is literally the only thing you could do with it, though. And apparently they do that in some places in North Egypt, relying on the thing that we were just saying, where they pump the water, goes through turbines, and then evaporates and goes back in the sea.
Yeah.
That, of course, won't help anything to do. That won't help sea level rises at all or anything like that. So then another expert, they ask, and he covers all of the bases here. He said, well, firstly, you'd be filling an aquifer with salt water, which guarantees a lack of useful water in the region for generations.
Generations.
Because
Okay.
it completely ruins the water table.
Brilliant.
There's obviously the cost and difficulty of building all the canals and setting up the pumps, finding the amount of space. And then also he pointed something out that if you put that much water on the Earth's crust, it will actually cause the continent to sink.
Oh, wow.
Which means that it would actually sink the land lower, which means that the effects of rising sea levels will be more pronounced on that bit of land.
Okay, this is incredible, isn't it?
And also, that mass of water genuinely has gravitational effects. So it would actually draw the tides toward it more, also making the water level go up.
Okay.
So it's absolutely insane idea.
We should put this in the maybe pile. That's incredible. So there's literally nothing about this whatsoever that provides any solution to rising sea levels. In fact, to use the old line from Brassai, that's the one thing we didn't want to happen.
No, exactly. Yeah. And then at the end, she gets a little digging against my hometown.
She does.
Amsterdam here.
Yeah.
And she says, will Amsterdam become the Atlantis of the future or something like that?
Yep.
Once again, a bit like her comment on the Thames Barrier, completely ignoring the fact that Amsterdam has the best flood defences because it's not meant to be here in the first place.
Yes.
That they spend millions and millions, billions of pounds on that. They've been looking into, how to negate sea level rises long before anybody else was. And also, it turns out that the world's most powerful pump is used to protect Amsterdam. 2 of them, in fact. At the mouth of the River Ij, which is the river that runs through Amsterdam, there are 2 Pentair Fairbanks Nieuwhuis pumps. Right, They were put there in 2004. It's the largest, most powerful pumping station in the world, and one of these pumps can pump 60,000 litres of water per second. Right.
Okay, wow.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
That's very impressive.
Yeah, it's about 5,000 horsepower. But yeah, so then you think, right, so how much would one of these pumps, how effective would it be? If we were going to go ahead with this plan, how effective would it be at doing this job? So one of these pumps would fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool in 41.5 seconds, right? It's pretty fast, isn't it?
That's pretty fast. Not as fast as I expected, but that's pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah. So then a TI class oil supertanker, which is the largest oil supertanker you can get.
Yeah.
They're pretty big, aren't they?
They're pretty big.
Yeah, so it would take 2 hours, 19 minutes and 44 seconds to fill one of them.
That's pretty swift.
That's pretty swift, isn't it? Now, right, so let's move up to the sort of sizes that they're talking about here.
Yep.
Lake Tahoe, it would take 80 years.
80 years, okay.
Yeah, so we're kind of moving out of the kind of time frames that we wanted to, because I mean presumably you're wanting to do this quicker.
Swiftly, yeah.
Grand Canyon, Mark.
Yep. But wait, there's more.
It would take 2,201 years to fill the Grand Canyon at that rate.
Okay. But if we have 2, it'll take what? Just 1,000 years?
Yeah. Lake Baikal, the world's largest lake, located in Russia. Boo. That would take 12,500 years to fill.
Jeez Louise. Okay.
And the Gulf of Mexico, Mark. Guess how long it would take to fill the Gulf of Mexico? Which, let's remember, is still not enough water to reduce the world sea level enough.
40,000 years.
1.32 million years.
Okay. That's a lot.
So, yeah, it's an absolute garbage. The other thing with other weird connection here, Mark, with the Dutch. I went on a bike ride last Sunday. It was a lovely sunny day. It's really nice weather here at the moment. I went to a place called Muiderslot, which is a proper medieval castle just outside Amsterdam. And I found out, I didn't know this. Did you know that between 1629 and 1964, they had a system called Dutch Water Line? And if they ever got invaded, they could just flood the country. They just open up a load of dams and the water just went all the way across the country and basically turned the bit where Amsterdam is into an island. So invading armies, and the water was too deep for an army to cross and too shallow for a ship to cross. They just compensate the farmers for ruining their crops. But it worked a couple of times. It kept those cheeky Spanish out at one point, and even more cheeky French. They couldn't get to Amsterdam because they just flooded the whole country, basically.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What were the Spanish doing up there?
Yeah, obviously didn't keep the germs out because they'd invented airplanes by then. And,
Hence it stopped in the 1960s.
Yeah. But I thought it was fascinating.
They're way ahead.
Yes, yeah. A lot of boat stuff on this, or a lot of sea
maritime stuff.
Yeah,
there is. Yeah. So the only two things really are just cut, death, and Chernobyl. So brilliant. You got to leaven the bread, haven't you?
The way you said that made it sound like a cop show. Cut, death, and Chernobyl.
Cut, death, and Chernobyl, get in here.
Anyway, right, more maritime fun.
Well, before the Atlantic gets any bigger, the new Virgin Atlantic Challenger is planning to cross it in record time. The earliest date for the crossing is only 6 weeks away, and on Tuesday, Peter went across to Lowestoft to check on her progress.
She's been in the water for just a few days, but this is the first crucial stage of her trials.
Let's cover.
Well, that's the sound of the two 2,000 horsepower diesels coming into life. And it's a critical and nerve-wracking moment for all the engineers and the designer. So far, Challenger hasn't been away from the dockside under her own power, but what they have established is that the pressures and temperatures are okay. But it's certainly been a race against time to get her to this stage.
5 weeks ago, she was still in two halves. But the cabin is made out of such lightweight aluminium that welding the halves together was ruled out. High-strength resin glue and rivets were chosen to make the join. But glue demands a fast and precise operation. There's no chance of adjustment once the glue begins to harden. So, this final stage of her assembly was completed just a few hours and 1,000 rivets later. Today, though, before the full glare of publicity at her official launching, she's making her first move down the river.
Fun if we in that bit but they really open up the taps on that boat there and it's going at full pelt. We just saw it just cleave Howard's life raft in two.
Or just come apart at the seams because the glue hadn't stuck properly or something like that. Yeah.
Don't you think it's interesting that he says that the construction of that boat is really lightweight so that they can't weld it, they have to glue it and then pop in 1,000 rivets? How are rivets lighter than welding?
I don't know. This whole segment was a weird one for me. I had forgotten that this transatlantic challenge was a thing at all. I hadn't thought about it for 30 years. And it's so weird to see this segment. And the more I watched it and rewatched it, the more questions I had. That was definitely one that came. It's like, because I remember thinking, gluing it down. I understand that. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because you want to keep it light. And okay, fair enough. And I suppose if you glue it all in one go, then maybe. But then it was you're right. It was the inclusion of the rivets that made no sense to me. Unless the rivets are made of glue. I don't know.
Fresh air.
Yeah, fresh air. Yeah. But then then it just asks the questions like, why? Why are they doing this? And the weird thing is, like, watching it, the assumption is that it's important. But of course it isn't. But like, it's a thing. So it's like, we're showing you the new boat that's going to do this. And that just reminded me about how, like, I had completely forgotten that there was a point in our lives when we were kids that, Richard Branson specifically was trying to cross the Atlantic as quick as possible in these big, huge stunts. And then later on in the 80s, he was trying to go around the world in a balloon?
Yes, yeah.
And I'd forgotten about that as well.
The balloon one was never off the bloody telly, was it?
No, it was always on.
His mate called like Pierre or Piers or something like that.
Yeah. But like, and it was more than the balloon. Like he basically strapped a fucking caravan to a giant, it was like and then all these things came back to me. It's like, I'd swear to God, one of the measurements of how big the balloons were was like, it was the size of the Royal Albert Hall or the volume of the Royal Albert Hall, transporting this caravan across the globe.
Thing is, they're essentially challenges of Branson's own.
Exactly.
Making.
No one else was challenging him.
He's made a challenge, and then they're trying to impress us that he's conquered this challenge.
Yeah, that no one.
The challenge wasn't there, mate.
No, it wasn't.
Until you invented it. I mean, I could invent a challenge that only I could beat.
The thing was in both cases, because I was thinking like, the transatlantic challenge, that makes sense. Like it was a thing when the quickest way to cross the Atlantic was a boat. Yeah, absolutely, getting there quicker was hugely impressive. But in both the cases of the transatlantic challenge and going around the world in a balloon, they've invented airplanes. Both are just like weird, archaic. It's like he's being a steampunk, It's this kind of weird, kind of Victorian futurism that he seemed to have embraced in the 80s. Yeah. And the weird thing is, like, I'd completely forgotten about it. And so I thought, well, maybe it's not just me. So I asked my wife, I was like, do you remember when Richard Branson was trying to go across the Atlantic as quickly as possible with a boat and then go around the world in a balloon? She goes, yeah, that does ring a bell. It's just this weird moment lost in the mist of time. And then she rightly pointed out, it's like, well, he's been completely blown out of the water by Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, hasn't he? Because even his Virgin Galactic is nothing.
Sounds crap compared to theirs.
It's nonsense, isn't it? It's like a Butlin's holiday versus, in a caravan underneath the Royal Albert Hall. It's like, it's so odd. There was a whole period of time when this really dominated TV. Like I remember, it was probably always on Tomorrow's World, probably always on Blue Peter or That's Life or just the news. And then the weird thing is, like, I reckon more people remember Balloon Baby than...
What, the Donald Trump one?
No. Do you remember the story a few years ago where, like, there's a child trapped in a balloon and it was going across the States and it was being followed by the FBI and the police and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
Not the baby balloon, but Balloon Baby.
There's quite a few similarities between Noel Edmonds and... Richard Branson, isn't there?
Yeah.
Beardy, slightly sinister, too much money,
jumpery as well.
Like weirdly, knitwear,
pop adjacent.
Weirdly popular, even though I find them quite sinister and unlikable. I don't know. I wonder if they've ever met each other.
You could be onto something there. Of course they have.
Both heavily involved in the music industry.
Yeah, semi pop adjacent. Yeah, they must have met each other.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said cop adjacent.
No, pop adjacent.
And I guess I was just thinking, because Noel Edmonds used to drop us a policeman quite a lot in Beadle style,
for
didn't
NTV. No, pop adjacent in the sense that, like, I get the impression that they make a claim to be more vital to the development of British pop than actually they deserve.
I think Edmonds is responsible for more deaths than Branson, which is impressive considering Branson owns an actual airline.
Yeah, I was thinking I'm not aware of any Virgin Atlantic crashes, but definitely more direct deaths. Which is a claim, isn't it? What a great claim that you've killed less people than Noel Edmonds. I can make that claim, and so can you, Russ.
Yeah,
cut that out if it's a legal nightmare, won't you? Kill is such a strong word. I think responsible for, I don't know, even responsibility. Oh, I don't know if we get away with that one.
How
about we say this? Russ, you and I, we have no blood in our copybooks.
No.
Can everyone say that? I'm not sure they can, no.
So Branson. I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, we've already mentioned this. This is a Branson invented thing. Although interestingly, I don't know whether this is because it not had its livery put on it yet, because it's only just been built. But there's no Virgin branding on it.
No, there wasn't.
He slaps a Virgin logo on anything that moves these days. I don't know whether it's because it hadn't been quite built yet, or whether it's been.
Well, this is before it's like it was due to have its unveiling a few days after Macann was there on, they say Tuesday. So, like, I'm assuming maybe it was being unveiled that day or Friday or something like that. But yeah, it's surprising that you don't put the branding on while it's being fabricated. But hey, I don't know, because you're right. He's not shy about advertising. I mean, that's all they were really, was advertising for Virgin. But
exactly, yeah. So it was an unofficial challenge, right, that happened between captains of ships across the Atlantic back in the golden era of liners, called the Blue Riband of the Atlantic. I've never been sure what a riband is. Is it just another word for ribbon? I don't know. You know, like blue
What a great
ribband.
question. I don't know. Yeah. Great question.
Obviously, a biscuit as well, isn't it? But
Yes.
I don't know what the. But anyway, the Blue Riband
It's definitely not the greatest
Atlantic.
biscuit.
No. It's very, very mid-tier lunchbox fodder. It was unofficial sort of thing that the captains did. They were doing it for the lols, basically. I don't know whether they were putting their passengers in any danger, but it was entirely unofficial.
Well, one captain definitely did.
yeah. It was just for prestige, really. But and then 1935, this British businessman called Harold Hales decided to sort of make it official. So he created the Hales Trophy, so every year they presented the Hales Trophy to whoever had crossed the Atlantic the quickest. And then in 1952, there was a liner it was just called the United States, the liner, which was, unsurprisingly, it was run by a company called American Lines.
Mm-hmm.
After it won it then, the competition kind of fell by the wayside because everybody started getting aeroplanes across the Atlantic. So it didn't, and you might be surprised by this, Mark, but they're considerably faster than boats. So then Branson comes along in 1985 and decides that he wants to break this record set by the United States in 1952. So he builds the Virgin Atlantic Challenger, which was the predecessor to this boat we see here. The Virgin Atlantic Challenger got within 100 miles of the US and hit a rock and sank in 1985. So, yeah. Don't worry, all the crew were fine. Presumably they had lovely big life jackets on. And, so he comes back 1986 this year, now, builds this. This is the Virgin Atlantic Challenger 2. And, I mean, I don't want to, spoiler Macann's segment that he sets up for later in the year, but this does break the record. It won the new challenge. It crossed the Atlantic in 3 days, 8 hours and 31 minutes, which was 2 hours and 9 minutes faster than that massive ocean liner did in the 1950s, which to me seems weird. Does that not seem weird to you? That it's only 2 hours faster than a huge ocean liner?
That still seems really slow.
Yeah. That's what I thought, yeah. It averaged 36 knots, anyway.
We could do 50, though.
So Branson goes, give me the Hales Trophy then. Like, I've just won it. And the American Maritime Museum, which had the Hales Trophy, was looking after it, for the previous winner, said, no, you can't have it. You just made this challenge up yourself. That's not an ocean liner. That's just a speedboat.
Yeah.
It doesn't count. And in fact, they really trolled him. They said, they derided his achievement, referring to the Challenger as a little toy boat. Bit sassy for a museum, isn't it? To say something like that. So he then decided to make his own trophy, which he called the Virgin Atlantic Challenge Trophy. But then he said anybody can now win this trophy off of me if you want to. So 1999, along comes the Aga Khan. Am I right in thinking, much like underwater helicopter tests and things like that, the Aga Khan used to get mentioned a lot more when we were younger.
Yeah, that sounds right.
As a public figure.
Yeah.
And I was never really entirely sure who the Aga Khan was, apart from the fact he was really rich, Middle Eastern in some way, and owned lots of racehorses.
Yes.
So, yeah.
A bit like the Sultan of Brunei, no one talks about him anymore.
Yeah. But there's some sort of religious element to the Aga Khan as well. I think maybe he's like a head of a church. So it's kind of like a cross between the Sultan of Brunei and the Dalai Lama.
God, wouldn't it be weird to live in a country where the head of state was also the head of church?
Yeah, imagine that. But anyway, he swans up in 1991 with his boat, the Destrio. Yeah, I don't know much that.
Fair play,
smashed the record, did 53 knots all the way across the Atlantic, and still holds the record to this day.
Of?
It didn't say what time it was. It just said he averaged 53 knots.
Oh, that's unhelpful, but I'm guessing that must be like just over 2 days.
Yeah, it's much faster, isn't it?
Yeah, that's incredible.
Branson was 36 knots, he's 53,
yeah.
so that's a pretty considerable stuff.
Yeah.
But no one's ever beaten it, probably because it's a made-up challenge.
I like the idea of somebody beating Branson just to take his own trophy away from him, though.
Yeah, that would be satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that gives the whole endeavour purpose. Oh, definitely. I mean, that's worth it.
Actually, Branson owns his own island, doesn't he?
He does, yes.
I wonder, is that affected by rising sea levels at all, do you think?
Gosh, what a good question. I mean, probably.
Hope so.
I don't think I don't hate the man. I just, I wouldn't want to see like his. I don't know.
The thing with Branson What I don't understand about Branson is why he's so fated as like admirable in some way. And as far as I can tell, he's just a rich businessman, but he's just very publicity seeking.
Yes.
But why does that make him such a great guy? That's what I don't understand.
I don't know. The same way P.T. Barnum was, like, people like a showman. And he was, like, especially in the 80s and 90s, he was a showman. And, I mean, for a while, I mean, it felt like everything he touched turned to success. I don't know, I suppose there's an element where people like to live vicariously, perhaps, as well. So, like, he was living the kind of... Even when I was younger, I always felt like I could sense that... We were talking in the last episode about inauthenticity and how, like, you can sniff it out. And I always felt he was inauthentic. Like, it was... I mean, even Danny Baker talks about it, isn't it? Like, we're like... Was it Danny Baker? Somebody was talking about, like he was paddy, and then he was asked a slightly challenging question, and he turned. And, like, you can... For me, you can sense that there. And partly, I would say, you know, and I mean this in a respectful sense, I can't imagine you can become a billionaire if you don't have that ability to switch and just go, like, you know, and just burn somebody. To be as wealthy as he has become takes an element of borderline admirable ruthlessness. Yeah. And I think he hit that, you know, under clown makeup and frankly...
or BG makeup.
Or yeah. Or Edmund's makeup, if you want, yeah. And I don't know, but people like a showman, don't they? I mean, like you know, I mean, how many people, you know, want to kiss Elon Musk's backside? And it's partly because he's out there kind of, you know, trolling on Twitter and doing stupid things / impressive things like sending astronauts into space and, you know, making babies with a pop star. It's like, I mean, if I was a billionaire, I swear to God, you'd never hear me ever again. I'd vanish. That's well, you know, that's exactly how it would work for me. But you know, I don't have the kind of ego or ruthlessness to get there in the first place. I don't know. It's an interesting question. But he was absolutely facing. I mean, he still kind of is, but nowhere. But like he's talking about mid-tier biscuits. He's a mid-tier billionaire now. I mean, like, he's not even incredibly wealthy anymore. Like, he was, but now he's pittance, isn't he? You know,
he's old school, isn't he? He can't make
old school.
In order to make the amount of money that the real billionaires make these days, you have to be an internet person, don't you? And he's pre-internet.
Yes, he is. Yes, he's Web 0.0. But then, I mean, to be fair to him, to become a billionaire when you actually made physical things is impressive. And the thing is, like, I don't think he was a paper billionaire. Like, you look at someone like Elon Musk and you think of Tesla and SpaceX. A lot of his wealth is on paper. It's not realized. It's not liquid. You know, if he liquidized Tesla and SpaceX, he wouldn't be worth very much because the stocks would collapse. Like, he can't cash out and maintain the value of the stock because he is the value of the stock. If he cashes out, everyone else cashes out because Musk is... No, he obviously has considerable wealth, but even like Jeff Bezos, a lot of his wealth is on paper, whereas, like, I get the impression that, you know, a lot of Branson's wealth could have been liquidized because it was spread across a panoply of different products. Like, he actually made things, which is astonishing. He wasn't just a conduit to other things. You know, I mean, Tesla is a real car and SpaceX are real rockets, but, like, not in the same way. I know, yeah, he's a really interesting person, but I also never understood why he was feted so much, except that he was entertaining for a lot of people. Because he was always on, like, he was very, I think, do you know what it is? He gave newspapers great copy. Because he would always do, exactly, you know, with glamorous girls, whatever. Like, he played the media really well. I'm not sure if there was a public appetite for him necessarily, but there was a media appetite for him because he would fill up pages.
The disaster at Chernobyl nuclear power station, the worst in nuclear history, is not over yet. Sources have insisted, in fact only a few minutes ago, that one of the reactors is still on fire, still releasing radioactivity into the atmosphere. The reactor, known as RBMK-1000, is a design unique to the Soviet Union. It uses water as a coolant, and it's allowed to boil directly within the core of the reactor, generating steam to drive the turbines which produce electricity. It has a large graphite core, or moderator, penetrated by more than 1,000 vertical pressure tubes containing the fuel elements. The water coolant is carried through those pressure tubes, a design feature shared by the British SGHWR, which was abandoned back in the mid-70s, as well as the successful Canadian reactor CANDU. Now, we've got a simplified model of CANDO here, and these are the pressure tubes. But in fact, instead of just 2 of them on this model, there are thousands of them. And that's a safety feature, because if one tube bursts, you don't get a major blowout. The steam from the coolant circuit is collected in steam drums here. And if the circuit breaks by a rupture in the drums or in these big pipes, that could lead to a massive loss of coolant, which would appear to be what happened in the Soviet reactor. It's not known whether it had an emergency cooling system, but if such a system was installed, it failed. The temperature of the fuel rods rose to 2,500 degrees centigrade until they melted down and the graphite moderators, carbon-based and flammable, caught fire. This led to an explosion, possibly because the burning graphite oxidized in the water to produce explosive hydrogen. Because graphite moderators combined with a water coolant is such a dangerous combination, it isn't used in any Western reactors. And the fact that the Chernobyl plant also had no proper containment meant that the explosion punctured the roof, releasing its radioactive contents.
By measuring the radioactive composition of the cloud, scientists in the West have worked out that the damaged reactor had only been in operation for a year, identifying it as reactor number 4 of the 4 reactors on site. And because heavier non-volatile substances like plutonium have not been detected, they think that so far the core has not vaporized. But the US Senate Intelligence Committee have been informed today that the accident is severe enough to close down the 3 remaining reactors at the plant. And as for the radioactive cloud, it's currently over Switzerland, and the latest forecast predicts it's moving towards Greece. It's expected to reach Britain in the next few days, by which time its radioactive levels should be insignificant.
Do up your flies, Mark, in case Chernobyl fall out.
It's a classic Russell joke if I've ever heard one. And I have heard that one before. Many times.
What can we say, Mark, that hasn't already been said by the wonderful HBO drama Chernobyl?
Well,
much better than anything we could do.
Yeah.
I think what's great about this, obviously now we know all of the circumstances of the incidents. It's quite impressive how much they're able to know only 5 days after the. In fact, at this time, it was still on fire even now. So the fact that they managed to work out quite a lot of the details of the incident, presumably the USSR aren't releasing very much information regarding it. So we've just got our scientists, testing the atmosphere.
Sniffing the air.
Sniffing the air, basically. And they're managing to work all of these details out about the...
hugely impressive, yeah.
About the incident, yeah. It's fascinating sort of stuff. Yeah, proper news story as it's happening. Put in the hands of Judith, does a great job. Shows us a lovely little model of a reactor.
The Canadian reactor, the CANDO, which obviously it must have been something that was like in a museum or it was available. Obviously, there was no model of like a Soviet reactor to hand. Yeah, no, it's really interesting because this is the first time I think that we have seen a segment on the show that is close to like news or current affairs that I can think of, in which like the story is live. It has not come to a conclusion. I know in a previous episode there was things like there was the floating hotel disaster next to the oil rig and stuff like that, which obviously was a real issue. But this is something where like this is something that's in the headlines and they are tackling it. But obviously what to me was fascinating was there's not a single recorded image of Chernobyl or the fire or anything like that. There's some of these iconic images that, you and I remember, of like the helicopter view over the kind of the gaping hole in the roof of the power station, or the liquidators up in the roof kind of literally just spending 10 seconds chucking stuff over, over this cliff edge straight into the raging fire below, and all these kind of things. None of that exists. There's only one stock image that they use. It's like
a black and white stock image.
A black and white, indeed. The lack of information they have, and yet actually they do a pretty good job of explaining that something's happened. Yeah, it's interesting to see kind of Tomorrow's World deal with a really big and scary issue in real time. And I think in general they do a fair job, though I do think they slightly go too far in trying to alleviate concerns, because I'm not, with the lack of information that they have, they are not in a position to say, whether or not things are or aren't going to get worse.
Particularly because obviously Han does most of it, and then at the end, almost to even reduce the amount of gravitas of the segment, they switch to Howard.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Who then informs us that there's a radioactive cloud going across Europe. Very light weather forecast style fashion. He says, "It's currently over Switzerland. It's heading towards Greece,
which is the wrong direction.
We'll likely hit the UK
2 days time,
but it'll be fine. It'll be fine by then. Don't
Negligible.
worry about it.
Negligible, he says. Yeah. And then there's things like the Americans are really confident that the damage done to reactor 4 will mean that the other 3 reactors will have to be shut down, which is like, that just didn't happen.
No.
Yeah, that much I remember. And even when you and I went, I'm moderately sure all reactors have been shut down, but only by a few years. And the weird thing is, like, Chernobyl was still basically fully staffed. Like,
there's still those people working there, wouldn't there?
Every day a train would come in and drop off the day shift and the night shift. And we were going in as like scientists that we are. But like there was a train line that, linked Chernobyl to like a town, 50 miles away. And basically half of Pripyat just moved over there eventually. And it was a fully staffed power station. And there was all these people going around in their white outfits and stuff like that. Like, I don't think it was producing power, but obviously you can't just turn a power station off. It still needs a little bit of TLC as it winds down. But no, it was an ongoing concern for quite a long time.
Do you remember that? There was that guy chucking bread in the
world's largest catfish. I do remember
and
that. And
there was those huge, like they were. Yeah, it was like an artificial canal, which presumably was serving water to the power station. Yeah. And he's throwing a bit of bread in there, and it was absolutely writhing with
gigantic,
the biggest catfish I've ever seen in my entire life.
Absolutely huge.
The water was full of them.
I dare say they were mutant catfish.
Exactly, they were like Incredible Hulk catfish.
Yeah. I think like a slice of bread would go in and then just be enveloped by this maw as it reached out and grabbed it. Yeah. In many ways, it was the most threatening thing we saw the whole time we were there.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's plenty of people that can explain exactly what happened at Chernobyl to you. I don't know whether it's worth me really going into much detail. Like I said, there's a courtroom scene in the Chernobyl drama where Jared Harris just explains basically what happened using blue and red cards on a board, which is the most perfectly simplistic explanation of the process I think you could probably ever have. So I won't even try and do that. But suffice to say, essentially what happened was it was a safety test that went wrong due to a combination of the people not really knowing what they were really doing and poor design of the reactor itself. They didn't have enough safety mechanisms in it to deal with these sorts of things. But the key thing to remember is this wasn't a nuclear explosion. I think people might imagine that it was like a nuclear bomb going off, but that's not the case at all. A nuclear power station, like any power station, is basically a giant steam engine that runs on heat. The heat heats up water, which drives a turbine. It's just that nuclear power stations require much less fuel. So like one little uranium pellet has the same amount of power as an entire lorry load of coal, for example. But in this case, that reaction got out of hand and a little bit out of hand.
A little bit out of hand,
and that caused the explosion. They reckon that at the moment of the explosion, the amount of energy generated was equivalent to the entire rest of the Soviet power grid combined.
Wow.
But obviously none of the that's an estimate because none of the equipment used to measure these things survived the blast, as you can imagine. Interestingly, the first country to know it was happening was Sweden. There were some blokes working in a nuclear power plant in Sweden, and there's a radiation detector on the door, and suddenly it was telling them they shouldn't be going through there because they were radioactive. And they went, "Oh, there's not been any problems here." So they checked, and then they realised that it was coming in on the wind from the direction of Chernobyl. So they phoned up Chernobyl and said, "You had any nuclear accident at all?" And everyone went, "No, absolutely fine here. No, nothing happened at all." So then the Swedes phoned up the Americans and said, "Can you check on the satellite or whatever?" And they checked, and they said, "Oh yeah, no, that is, it's on fire." It burned from the 26th of April until the 4th of May was when they finally put it out. So it was chucking up all sorts of nonsense into the atmosphere all through that. It mainly fell on Belarus and Ukraine. But yeah, this radiation cloud that Stableford was talking about, I watched, there's quite a nice animation you can watch on YouTube of the cloud as it goes around Europe. Contrary to what Howard says, it almost deliberately avoids Greece. It grows and it goes around Greece and it sweeps all the way across the UK. And only then, after then, does it sort of go into Greece. Pyrenees do an absolute bang-up job and completely prevent it going into Spain. Spain was untouched
well done.
by the cloud. I think the big disagreement about the Chernobyl is actually how many casualties it caused. Because it's impossible it's impossible for people to agree on the methodology to work out how many people were killed by it. I mean, everyone can agree on how many people were directly killed by it, i.e. got blown up in explosion or died of radiation poisoning within the first few days and months of that. So approximately 30 people died immediately in the seconds to months after the disaster. And then 60 in total died of exposure and cancer, which doesn't sound like, actually doesn't sound all that bad, does it really? Considering it's a massive explosion and all that. Then you've got to take into account the amount of radiation released into the atmosphere, how many other cancers and things like that did it cause. And this is what people can't agree on at all. Absolutely. And the range of estimates is massive. So the UN in 2006 decided to alight on the number of 4,000 people, they reckon, in total. Greenpeace, they reckon it's 200,000 people. And then there's another study done in 2007, which reckons it's 985,000 people.
Really? That seems
extreme to me.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind that we wandered around there, Mark, a mere 2 decades later, and we're both still alive.
At the moment.
I'm inclined...
You're calling shenanigans on that one?
I'm inclined to go to the more lower estimates, I think.
Between 4 and 200,000 sounds about right. I mean, I'm not going to... The thing is, we went to, as well as going to Chernobyl, we went to the Chernobyl Museum in Kyiv, and it was a very dry museum, but even there, they were trying to say that it is next to impossible to count the impact of the explosion because it's just difficult to do. It's like, it's difficult to say how much it increased. It clearly had an impact. I mean, it absolutely did. But they were even in that really dry museum, and it was full of things like like some of the vehicles cleaned, obviously, from the liquidation of the reactor and stuff like that. The other thing was it was just too controversial for the Soviet Union to in any way record properly what happened in the years after. I mean, a lot of this information is just lost because it wasn't. I mean, if you remember, if you watched the HBO program, you know that frankly, the real tragedy was the explosion, but the subsequent tragedy that actually led to a lot of problems was the bureaucratic nightmare. We'll never know, but it's somewhere between 4 and 200,000 feels right, doesn't it? It's not nothing, but it's not a million people either.
I always felt like the big. I don't know whether this is my perception or whether it's the nature of the British media, but I always think that the big news story to come out of Chernobyl in the years afterwards was the fact that the Welsh sheep
2000
were radioactive. Radioactive Welsh sheep. I looked into this. As soon as they saw that cloud was coming for us, the government told them all of the sheep farms on high land in Britain. They told them they weren't allowed to move their sheep. They would compensate them, but don't move your sheep because they're radioactive. We don't want radiation to get into everybody's kebabs or whatever.
But
that went on for absolutely ages. It turns out, and so they lifted the restrictions over time. But in Wales and Cumbria, there were still farms right up to 2012 that they weren't allowed to move their sheep. It was only at that point that they lifted all of the sheep moving restrictions.
I thought it was like the year 2000 or something. Like 2012 they had restrictions. Incredible.
Yeah.
How many sheep died as a result of Chernobyl then? We'll never know.
No, I mean, we know how badly treated the farmers. Anyway, so,
yeah, we do. Yeah.
Probably being radioactive just was blessed relief. It kept the farmers away from them for a while. Yes, but as you say, they kept the other reactors going. So the reactor 2 that caught fire, so they shut that down in 1991. Then they shut down reactor 1 in 1996 after the International Atomic Agency basically pleaded with them to do so. And then the final one, reactor 3, was shut down in the year 2000.
2000, yeah.
Yeah. Who knows what those workmen were doing when we were there 9 years later? Maybe they were keeping it going on the sly, using it to charge up their phones.
Yeah, maybe. I kind of assumed that they were there just because, you can't just turn a reactor off. Like, you have to. Yeah, I'm sure it probably needs a little bit of TLC.
I suppose they got rid of all that radioactive graphite as well, didn't they? That's the That's the big problem. That was the big problem. That was the thing. Apparently, that was the other thing. I think probably the most disturbing image was of the thing I was reading was that the firemen who were trying to put out the put out the reactor when it was still burning. Obviously, there's all these lumps of because the graphite's used to control the reaction in the reactor, and all these big lumps of graphite had been blasted out of it, and they were just laying around on the floor. So they're basically just like warm lumps of coal. And the firemen were like warming their hands around them in the cold night. And obviously, it's actually just absolutely beaming loads and loads of radiation into them as they're doing it. They have no obviously no. I think that's the scary thing I find about radiation is like most hazards to humans, we can somehow spot them, can't we? We can either feel heat or see light or smell or taste bad things. But radiation is entirely. We don't know. We can't possibly detect that it's there unless we've got radiation detector.
That and carbon monoxide. Yeah, silent killers. No, that's true. That really kind of breaks your heart when you think about it. Like those poor guys who were like deliberately underinformed about, like they were bred to follow orders. They weren't given the proper information, so they were just warming their hands and killing themselves. They didn't know that. I mean, that's one of the good scenes in Chernobyl, actually, is when they hire the miners, because the miners will just get on with it. And they were like, we're just getting it. And they were stripping their clothes off, even though they were like stripping away protection, because like, nah, we're just going to get down there and we're going to dig a hole, because that's what we do. We are hole diggers. Like, and there's a part of me thinking, it's incredibly creditable, but it's like you are condemning yourselves.
Tough old bastards.
Tough old bastards, indeed. And the other thing I just want to say is, like, the other thing that kind of haunted my mind as a child, probably a bit when I was older, was like, there was a silhouette of the power station, but then there was also the elephant's foot, which is there was a part of the radioactive core that became molten and dripped down into the basement, and it made this elephant's foot style shape, and it remains like one of the most toxic, corrosive, radioactive things. Like even now, like they try and put a camera in to film it, and it burns out within seconds. And that just one
it's a giant umbrella stand.
Oh, why was that a thing? Why was that a thing?
Well, what else could you use an elephant's foot for?
Ask the elephant.
For moulding doner kebabs.
Absolutely. Oh, I didn't realise doner kebabs had a mould that they were poured into. Yeah, God, that was a thing, wasn't it? Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's enough Chernobyl, isn't it?
Yeah, no, let's go. Should we move on to something a bit more light-hearted?
Oh, don't, mate. Oh, Jesus. It gets worse.
The greatest fear for any parent with a young baby is the possibility of cot death. But there's now another suggestion, it's only a theory, that there could be a link between cot death and the time when a baby's larynx starts to move towards its adult position, which is usually around the 4-month stage. Now, I'd just like to introduce you to Julianne and little Katie here. Now, how old's Katie?
She's 8 weeks. 8 weeks old.
Behaving impeccably as well.
Oh, very good. We're lucky today.
Now, the thing about Katie and any other baby of her age is that she can do something which we can't do. That is, she can drink water through her mouth and breathe through her nose at the same time. Well, just let me explain why that should be. Now, the reason is that a baby's voice box, which is just up at the top of the windpipe here, is very much higher than that of an adult. In fact, it pushes right up against the nasal passage here, forming a sealed air passage, so that any fluid or food taken in just passes around and underneath it. And it's in that sort of position for chimps and other primates. But in humans, it doesn't stay here for long, because if it did, you wouldn't be able to talk properly. In fact, by the age of 6, it's dropped right the way down here, leaving a resonant chamber, which is very important for the formation of vowel sounds. However, when an adult swallows, the epiglottis covers the windpipe like that, and the soft palate covers the nasal passages. Now, the shift of that voice box downwards starts around the 4-month stage, which is the same sort of period when cot deaths do tend to occur. And the suggestion is that once that shift has started, should anything suddenly startle the baby, then the voice box may be drawn up again. Now, that's not usually a problem, but if the soft palate gets jammed between it and the nasal passage like this, then the baby can't breathe. Edmund Creelin, who is Professor of Anatomy at Yale, developed the idea, and he argues that because this is a reflex action, the baby can't relax and allow this palate to unjam, so it suffocates.
It's certainly not a subject to be frivolous about, but it is the first segment presented by Maggie. So we do get to start off discussing Maggie's incredible outfit, which we haven't mentioned yet.
No, we've not. No, it's incredible.
It is.
It's something.
Well, my first thought was she's some sort of sorceress or magician. I could imagine her palling around with Doctor Strange or something like that. It's a huge, oversized.
Or Jared, the Goblin King.
Yeah, it's a suit. The jacket part of it is over knee length.
Yes.
Dark blue with a sort of a pattern of, I think they're pocket watches or something like that, aren't they?
Oh, I haven't looked that close.
If she was ever cast as Doctor Who, maybe it would be her Doctor Who outfit.
Especially around this time as well.
Yeah, and there's and then a sort of like roughly cravat, cravat, I don't know what you would call that. And then a lovely sort of mane of highly hairsprayed 80s hair. It's quite something, isn't it? I think it's. I mean, normally I look forward to Maggie wearing something where the sleeves don't match the body.
Obviously,
which isn't the case.
We have boxes to tick.
Isn't the case here?
No,
but I think this is something even better. I feel like she could hypnotise me.
That's it, like mesmerise. Yeah.
But the other thing it reminded me of, I don't know whether you've seen this. I put at the bottom of the.
I did see. Yeah.
It is quite reminiscent of what Pete Burns wears in the "You Spin Me Right Round Like a Record Baby Right Round" video at the beginning. It's just his is slightly more pinky purpley, but it's a similar. That's what it makes me think of. I don't know what you call it.
If it's not obvious, we're struggling to explain what she's wearing. I don't know. To me,
it looks so heavy.
It does, and like it's. What do I like? It's like she's like an old dame wearing a house coat, but like she's turned the house coat inside out so that the lining is on display, not the woolly bits. I don't know. The thing is like. It's like, who are the bad guys in Superman 2? It's like if they had to dress up for formal wear, instead of wearing their leather. She looks quite evil. She looks like she's the antagonist of the program. Not in a kind of like, she looks evil in a really cool way. Like she's really, I don't know. It's a really odd outfit. Bearing in mind, it's we were talking about Macann earlier. It's like her and Macann did not come out of the same changing room. They have completely different ideas of what you need to be wearing on a primetime TV show.
I feel like this is probably absolutely, on trend for 1986. I think she's probably,
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it has to be. Well, I don't know. She's made it up.
I mean, she's quite a small person as well. I mean, I don't know whether that's just a normal, like a normal person.
Do you think like she's wearing her dad's Superman 2 evil man outfit?
Yeah.
This is a way of distracting ourselves from talking about what this actual piece is about. Anyway, go on.
Well, it's a very serious problem which has never really gone away, and is still something of a mystery to doctors. It's cot death, or what they now call sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Presumably they wouldn't call it that then, because wasn't that that was the selling off of the gas shares, wasn't it? And they would get it very confusing. It's a piece where Maggie is suggesting that this might be the cause of it, but there's no real evidence that it is the cause of it. And Mark, I can tell you that it definitely isn't the cause of it. No. So I don't know. It's a little. I think you agreed. It's a little bit irresponsible because it's kind of.
Well, I think I said borderline irresponsible, and you just said a little bit. I think it's just straight up irresponsible because it's very difficult not to compare this to the two segments we saw Judith Hann present. One about ultrasound, and one I think about cervical cancer.
Yeah.
And in both cases, they were addressing either a serious concern or a serious issue, but they were, I think we both agreed, to us, they held up the standards of what public service broadcasting should be, in which you have something, either a serious issue like cervical cancer or a serious concern like people maybe perhaps not using ultrasound because they've heard it's a bad thing. And it took time and effort to inform and educate, and ultimately did a good job of presenting very serious issues in a very simple, understandable way. And at the end of it, you and I both felt like, not just us, but probably everyone who's watching felt like they understood an issue, and perhaps they were able now to make better and more informed decisions about their own personal health. And in both those cases, it was about female health, ultimately. This, I think it's very striking that Judith isn't presenting this. I almost don't want to read too much into it, but ultimately this takes an incredibly serious subject. I mean, there possibly can't be a more serious subject to discuss on television than babies dying. And it does not come to conclusion. In fact, at least they say there isn't enough. I don't know. When I was saying earlier that, this is the piece that really did kind of frustrate me, because let's be honest, let's go back to where we started. This is irresponsible, really. I think, because this isn't a solution. This isn't the problem. This isn't the solution. And they have a poor woman there. In the ultrasound piece, they had a woman who was actually undergoing an ultrasound and showing that she was happy to do it. And she explained the value of undergoing an ultrasound to better understand the health of the unborn child. And here you have a woman with her daughter who is propping her kid's bed's mattress up with phone books because the BBC asked her to. The BBC have asked her to experiment on her child.
She's there more as set decoration, really, isn't she? Because she's not
a prop.
I mean, there's no real guarantee that she's even doing that.
Was it Juliet?
She's there. She's there
Casey. Little Casey's a prop. Yeah, no,
who's just got an extraordinarily thick head of hair for a child
very
of his age.
Hairy baby. Which bit like you, I always find that smidgen disturbing at times.
Yeah.
Thank God they lose it after a while.
It just doesn't look right when they've got that much hair at that young age. But yeah, no, she looks very much like the receptionist out of the British Empire.
She does, yeah.
Mark, I genuinely didn't know that babies drank water. I always thought they just drank milk. I didn't know you just give a baby water. And she's giving him a bottle of water.
I don't think you do, though.
But she's giving she's giving her a bottle of water. I don't know. That surprised me. But then, we move on to this sort of 3-dimensional diagram of the nose and throat. It kind of looks like those old Tunes adverts or Locket's adverts. The cross section of the head and the throat and everything. Noticeably, Mark, in the colours of the Ukraine flag.
Absolutely, yeah.
The nasal passages being blue and the mouth being
before Ukraine was independent, and I assume they settled on the flag. There it was, right there, waiting to be plucked by.
Maybe the Ukrainians were watching.
That's what I mean. Yeah, they did. They easily in Soviet Ukraine during Chernobyl. They were absolutely watching BBC One Tomorrow's World.
Well, to find out about their own accident, and then they went, "Oh, we do need a flag in the future.
Do need a flag."
Those nasal passages look patriotic. So there's a whole thing about how, which is, and there's a fairly interesting little thing that the baby's larynxes are higher up because they don't need to talk, and then the larynx drops as they get older when they need to start forming sounds. This doctor reckons that there might be something going on here where the baby's secretly getting its airway cut off. But it's very hard for doctors to tell after the baby has died because the larynx would then fall, and so there would be no evidence that is how the baby had died. But it's weirdly demonstrated by Maggie pushing this sort of what looks like a piece of blue half bamboo, like sort of up into the like the nose, and then there's these weird little flaps. I just don't think that those parts of the body actually look like that in real life.
She makes it look like it goes up and down like the plunger in a swanny whistle.
Exactly,
and I don't believe that's what happens. And I say I don't believe that's what, because like it was news to me that a child's larynx drops like a pubescent boy's balls or whatever. Like I didn't know that. But then the fact that it goes back up, and because I think she's like, surely at some point like the top of the larynx is exposed, but also like the top of the larynx isn't like this weird tube that goes,
No,
it's not like a flute in your throat, So that didn't make sense to me. Now, I'm not a doctor. As I said, I'm a nuclear scientist. I'm not a doctor. But that just didn't it didn't feel right. There we go.
No, yeah. And then obviously the piece ends with, well, you could do this. We've asked some doctors whether it's going to hurt, and they said no, but there's no guarantee that you'll do anything either.
Well, it seemed to me that
it's a bit of a...
The mum, whose name I've forgotten, Julianne, is it?
Yes.
Julianne basically said it's okay because she doesn't slip down the bed. And basically doctors seem to be saying, like, well, as long as they're not on a 45-degree angle, like it's not doing any harm. It's like, this isn't a solution. And then the other thing I want to talk about with this segment is Anne Diamond, because cot death was, it feels like, I mean, in a completely different way, a bit like the transatlantic challenge, feels like a really, for me, a 1980s, 1990s story. Like it felt for a while it was everywhere, rightly so, because it was, killing children and no one knew why, and no one, no one knew why. You know, and in a weird way, although it's SIDS, like sudden infant death syndrome is probably a smarter, less callous or cruel sounding name, but kind of sums it up better, which is like, I mean, basically it just seems to be a medical term for like, shit happens, I'm really sorry, you know. I remember Anne Diamond, I think it was her son dying of cot death. And the reason I bring her up is because, like, I suppose I just always associate her with cot death because she was famous. You know, you and I are on record as being fans of Anne and Nick.
Yes,
and you know, her son died of cot death, and I think, for my mind, she became one of the first celebrities to take a really incredibly serious, private, personal tragedy and try and do something. And my memory is that, I mean, I think principally she campaigned to have parents make sure that their children slept in their back and not their front, because I think her son was asleep on his tummy and passed away. And her campaign was that it's safer to have children sleeping on their back, which I think really connected. And to the best of my knowledge, like, her campaign saved lives. And it's not as much of a story anymore because I just don't think it happens as much anymore. Even if we don't know what it comes from, it's like, clearly there's enough knowledge out there to know that, like, I don't know anyone. I'm not a parent, and it's a long time since I've been a child, but I have friends and family who are parents. Like, I don't think any of them would have their child sleep on their fronts. And as I said to you in the notes, it's like tummy time, this idea of a child being in the front, it's like it's important for development and kind of, you know, exercising muscles. It's a supervised activity now. Like, you put time aside for tummy time, like you put them on the mat in the living room, so every, you know, kiddie stare, you know, but everyone can watch the child, make sure they're safe, and, you know, they're interacting with things and trying to move forward and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I mean, I deliberately never look things up when we watch Tomorrow's World, because I always know that that's your thing. But, like, my memory is that, like, that was a hugely successful campaign that she almost certainly has saved countless lives as a result. And here is Tomorrow's World. Obviously, I think this predates, I'm sure Anne Diamond's son died in the late 90s, early 90s. It is irresponsible. And it's a shame to say this, especially for an episode that we both really enjoyed, but it is... I expect more from Tomorrow's World. I expect them to have a solution. If you're going to talk about cot death, then you either talk about how no one knows, or you provide a solution. You can't do both.
Yeah.
You can't provide false hope.
Also,
you can provide false hope about new LED lights that can work underwater. Like, that's not important. Don't worry about it, you know. But you can't provide false hope for cot death, because...
Also, that cot is horrible.
Horrible, Russell. I swear to God, I think our family had one like that, though. It's the artwork at the end, isn't it?
Yeah, the scene opens with a cot, and it has for some unknown reason, a very large depiction of a bunny rabbit talking on the phone.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Is that like because rabbit on the phone?
Absolutely not. No.
But it's a really unpleasant illustration.
Yeah.
So I went on a little bit of a journey here, looking into this. Well, the results may surprise you, Mark.
Okay.
They certainly surprised me. First of all, SIDS. A few SIDS facts. Mm-hmm. Amazingly, even though, like, still a lot of, you know, they've done a lot to try and reduce it, it is still the leading cause of infant mortality in the Western countries.
Wow.
Contributes to half of all post-neonatal deaths.
Crikey.
And it makes up around 80% of all sudden and unexpected infant deaths, right? Lovely little side fact they added here on Wikipedia was that murder by suffocation may be misdiagnosed as SIDS, but this is believed to make up less than 5% of cases.
Okay.
So that's nice, isn't it?
That's good.
But yeah, so in 1990, globally, it was responsible for 22,000 deaths from SIDS. In 2015, it was 19,000 deaths. So it's reducing over the years. But they still don't know exactly what the cause is. They've identified a few factors that could contribute to it. So it's one of these sort of like almost nebulous syndromes where there could be multiple things that lead to it. But they have identified definitely that the main factor is sleeping on your back rather than your front. That is definitely the best way of preventing it. But other ways of doing it are making sure the mattress is nice and firm, making sure there's no loose bedding, making sure that the baby's sleeping in a separate bed but in the same room. The room's not too hot, and don't smoke fags in the same room. Weirdly, there's a difference in the racial background of people according to how much it happens. Mm-hmm. They're not sure why. So Pacific Islanders and Asians have the lowest incident of it, whereas Native Americans have the highest amount of it.
Gosh.
And then Europeans are in the middle, and they have no idea what that possibly is why. So then I thought, right, let's type in Sid's larynx, find out what we can find out there. And then I didn't find specifically this study, but I did find that there had been done some tests, and they found out that sometimes babies with inflamed larynxes, there's a higher incidence of babies that have died of SIDS that have inflamed larynxes, and they've died of sleep apnea, right? Which is kind of similar to what you're saying here. But then this is where the massive heel change occurred, Mark. I then typed in Professor Edmund Creelin, who's the author of this study, Mark. And according to his Wikipedia, he was a very sort of celebrated paediatrician of his time. He made a book called The Self-Illustrated Anatomy of the Newborn, and then he published another book called The Functional Anatomy of the Newborn in 1973. And those two books are considered the premier sort of books about child anatomy, even now, that you can get, right? So I thought, oh, this bloke, clearly, absolute expert. But then I discovered that everything he said is total bollocks.
Wow.
So, Maggie opens this and she says that babies are unlike adults in that they can breathe and drink water at the same time.
Yes, she did say that. Yeah.
And this has passed into, this is everywhere. If you look that up, it says it all over the internet. It even says it in textbooks and things like that. It is entirely untrue. Edmund Creelin made it up. It is not true at all. Babies can't drink and breathe at the same time.
Okay.
So his entire hypothesis is nonsense. So I found this science paper published by these two people, Joel Walensky and Patricia Henton, and they're absolutely livid. They're absolutely livid with Edmund Creelin because basically he's ruined whole swathes of medical texts about child development because it's been taken as read that babies can breathe and swallow at the same time, and it's totally untrue. So they said in their response to this, which they actually published last year, the concept that newborns can breathe and swallow simultaneously has no merit. It is absolutely false. It was propagated primarily by Edmund Creelin and his student, Jeffrey Lateman. Our evaluation of the primary research article that supported this concept found the article to be unconvincing due to numerous misrepresentations of the data. Despite clear evidence that newborns cannot breathe and swallow simultaneously, Creelin and Lateman continued to support this concept well into the 21st century, which resulted in the concept becoming embedded in popular culture and the internet, with potentially significant negative clinical consequences.
Amazing.
And then they added this brilliant bit at the end, which is entirely unrelated, but quite interesting in itself. And clearly they were just mad and on a roll. The idea that babies can breathe and swallow at the same time joins a very long list of incorrect, dangerous notions developed often by paediatricians on the care of the newborn. One such notion, noted in an article on Slate on this topic, was that babies, regardless of age, should not be fed at night because this overindulgence could contribute to the development of socialism.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they're fuming. So amazingly, this whole segment is based on an entirely spurious premise, which has pervaded the whole of society. It's based on this Edmund Creelin fellow who's full of nonsense.
Yeah.
So that's why sleeping your baby on a slope over some phone books won't help because its anatomy is not what they claim it is.
And that came all the way into. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So when was this report?
Even if you type that into the internet
it's
now,
still there, all over.
If you type in "babies can breathe and swallow at the same time," it's full of people saying that that's true. It's in books, it's in everything, and it's a complete lie.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, that's reassuring that it's even worse than we thought. So well done, everyone.
It's always nice to have a little revelation, though, isn't it, Mark?
No, that was good. Yeah. Not least because I could see you building up to something there. So well done. That's incredible, though. God, that's astonishing, isn't it?
Right, well, where was it we left Howard?
I had a feeling this was going to get worse before it got better. The North Sea isn't the sort of place you want to spend a lot of time bobbing up and down, even if you're dry and in a life raft. I want somebody to come and find me, and quick.
All life rafts are equipped with a radio distress beacon, and as the North Sea is forever crisscrossed with helicopter traffic, it's only a matter of time before they'd know that someone, somewhere, needed help.
13746 November, can I help?
Although they can home in on a radio signal, they can't use it to plot my exact position. So actually finding me could use up too much precious time. But I've got a homing beacon that's got a lot more to it.
Now, if we have a look what's inside there,
we'll find that at the bottom end, there's this small UHF VHF transmitter, and this sends out signals on the international distress frequency. And when instruments like these become mandatory towards the end of the year, the signal that this transmits will be a cue for all the craft in this area to start scanning for me using their radar, because the rest of this, all of this, is a radar transponder.
Now, don't you agree with me, Mark? I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but do you agree with me that it would have been better, more exciting, if the two Howard in a Life Raft segments had been run into each other, and it had been like, so Howard in the first segment he's in the swimming pool, isn't he? Mm-hmm. If he'd just zipped up when the lights had gone out, and then when he'd unzipped, he was in the middle of the North Sea, and then we had this segment now. Where
that would have been good. That would have been good TV.
It would have been a lovely little switch between the two, and I kind of wonder whether that's what they originally intended, and then they decided it didn't work or something. Because that would have been a great little bit of business, I reckon.
Because the thing is, I mean, at the end of the segment on Cot Death, the tone of it. I mean, I know one of my kind of hoary old tropes that I'm fascinated by is uncomfortable and unnecessary tonal shifts in presentation. So there you have Maggie being asked to talk about something serious like cot death, and then with the mum and child next to her, she goes like, now where did we last leave Howard? Try to crowbar in kind of a comedic link to something that's going to be a lot lighter. That doesn't work because of the tonal shift, I think. But the other reason it doesn't work is because actually the last time we met Howard, he was not on a life raft. He was in the studio talking about Chernobyl, which really annoyed me. It's like, where did we last leave Howard? Oh, just over there. That's where you last left him. So like, it doesn't work in two levels. But you're absolutely right. I hadn't even thought about that. But that would have been really lovely if he had kind of zipped it up and then unzipped it and found himself in the middle of the ocean. Not least because I think he could have done it proud, wouldn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But unfortunately, we don't have that.
No.
But we think
we have to deal with what we have to deal with, Russell.
It is very much a continuation of both Howard's segment and our general nautical theme.
Yes.
He's out in the middle of the North Sea.
Well, everything is connected to water. Chernobyl is connected to water.
Oh, yeah.
And so is apparently cot death.
So
his babies can breathe and drink water.
That other 1970s episode was all watery as well.
It was, yeah.
But I mean, I've written it down in my notes as radar dildo.
No,
that's basically what it is.
You also said, I've never seen a life raft wearing a strap-on before. That's also what you put, yeah. Whereas I put slightly suggestive phallic beacon. Yeah.
I mean, and the other reason why it would be quite good to put at the end of the other bit is it's not that great.
Neither of us wrote much, did we? There's not a lot to say.
We get some nice in-cockpit footage, which is that sort of very 1980s filmed in-cockpit footage. It always reminds me of the Falklands for some reason. But and then obviously Howard being hooked up into the helicopter, which I think he's genuinely doing. Which
I think he is.
Bit of fun for him.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, being the Murdoch, he's probably quite used to being in helicopters anyway.
That's very true.
Not a huge amount to say about it. I mean, I could tell you this particular invention he has here was never used.
Oh, really?
No.
You seem very confident it was good.
Well, the problem is, Mark, that we all know what was in. Well,
GPS.
GPS. Basically,
all right, okay.
A couple of years later, they just unleashed GPS upon
Well, then
the
let's
world.
not drag this out.
And thus rendering this entirely pointless.
Right, okay, cool.
But what is interesting, though, Mark, and I didn't know this, these beacons in general are called EPIRBs, which stands for Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon.
Clever as Anum.
And it's an internationally agreed standard. The whole world uses them. So they all release their signal at 406 megahertz, the internationally agreed thing. And there's a network of 47 satellites, which were put up in there in 1982. They came online, but it was an international agreement. But the weird thing is the countries that agreed to build this were Canada, France, the US, and the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. It's a weird little combo of countries, isn't it?
It is a bit odd.
But yeah, they agreed in 1979 to put this system in the sky, and it's called the COSPAS SARSAT system. COSPAS being some sort of Russian acronym, boo, and SARSAT being the English acronym, which stands for Search and Rescue Satellite Aided Tracking. Right?
Okay.
They put this up in the sky, and then so basically once this was up there, from 1982 until now, whenever you set off one of these beacons, satellite picks it up, goes to whatever the nearest base station is, they then find you using GPS. Works an absolute treat. Between 1982 and December 2020, it has saved at least 53,790 people's lives.
That's not an insignificant number of people.
But yeah, as I say, they never used this radar thing because GPS came along. And also, I'm not sure if I'm flying an aeroplane, do I want my radar filled up with a load of gibberish from some blokes?
No, it really does fill it up, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I imagine that was a concern as well. But yeah, no, that's the EPIRB. Should we move on to...
let's do cake.
An even shorter segment.
Oh, thank God.
Now, if ever you've bought one of these birthday cakes from a supermarket, you probably assume that all the fancy icing on the top has been done by machine. Well, you'd be wrong, because at the moment, it's still done by hand. However, cake icing is soon to be a job for the dedicated robot. Actually, I rather like his joined-up writing. Quite special, that. Well, this is a subtle message to remind you that next week we have a special show to look back on 21 years of Tomorrow's World. And we'd very much like this young man to join us. And he was born in Hammersmith Hospital between January the 11th and January the 20th, 1965. And he was revived by the latest techniques of the day. Well, all this was later shown on Tomorrow's World. He came through all this fit and healthy, and he too will now be 21. So if this is you, or your son, or anyone you know, then please phone us on 01 if you're outside London, 811 8055. And we look forward to joining both him and you next week. Good night.
I don't think it's a trope, but we do have a nice tradition forming, maybe, of Maggie Philbin being forced to speak over loud machinery at the end of a programme. Because in the previous episode, obviously, she was playing a fruity that was paying out something rotten, and then she was using a cash converting machine to kind of sort out her coins. And here now, bizarrely, as a way of kind of linking into the fact that next week's episode is the 21st birthday of Tomorrow's World. And as you rightly point out, like, why they celebrate the 21st birthday, I don't know.
Why not the 20th, the previous year?
I'm assuming they must have done, but why the 21st? I don't know. Except that, well, maybe we'll get there. But like, there is a giant bit of machinery in the studio piping out icing onto a cake that could be done silently by a person, probably much more effectively and much more beautifully. And this is all a way of linking to the fact that next week's the birthday episode, and they really want to track down a young man who would now also be 21, who was on one of the first episodes being resuscitated live on camera.
Yeah,
and you and I were both discussing while we were watching there. It's like horrific scenes.
It's a blood-streaked newborn.
Yeah.
Still with the the umbilical cord and all that sort of attached. They've obviously
not breathing,
whipped
unconscious.
Whipped out as they're trying to resuscitate. I mean, obviously, thankfully they did resuscitate, but it's still like quite a hardcore scene.
Yeah.
To be
thank God it's in black and white.
To be played, yes, in black and white, and also as a sort of a. This segment is normally a sort of an and finally, slightly light-hearted, almost always underwhelming end segment. And he's got Maggie's cheery chat and a cake decorated robot over the top of it. It's all a bit of an incongruous melange of madness.
I would argue there's some weird tonal shifts going along, even just that one segment. It's like horrible to watch and then annoying to listen to. So a real double.
I mean, the beauty of that cake decorating machine coming in is it's a supremely annoying noise. I don't think there's been a noise as annoying since Robbie the Robot, or it's called the Nintendo robot
thing. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely nothing is said about it really, apart from the fact it's a cake decorating robot. So it's almost as if it's been brought in specifically just so Maggie's got something to shout over the top.
That's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah, but I mean,
but also like the robot. Let's take the robot on. Let's take it as let's say that's what the segment's about. Is this cake decorating robot that ices cakes? It's not quicker than a person. It's not quieter than the person. It's not better than the person. It literally adds nothing to the process. I reckon one experienced baker could be knocking out cake after cake after cake in the amount of time that this is badly scrolling 21st birthday at a diagonal angle on a square cake. The one she held up, which someone has done themselves, is so much better than the cake being displayed on the show. So, swing and a miss.
And then we finish on a completely new LED sign in the in the style of the
cake
LED sign from the beginning.
Yeah.
Of
Oh,
the
yeah. So,
programme.
same kind of...
Same technology.
Yeah,
and it's infinitely more impressive looking than the one that Macann was showing us. I don't know why. This one you can read, it lights up, it's multiple colours.
Well, and there's your out, right? But like you have Macann talking about the quote unquote neon sign, throwing a brick at it, putting it in water, and then he
turning
says,
it on, it lights
and
up.
here's one we made earlier to show you what a sign looks like. And it's, by the way, if you can track down this baby, and that was the other thing that really annoyed me. Is like, so the birthday episode is next week, and they're still looking for him. It's like you're not, gonna, this is late in the day, isn't it?
And also weird to have two entirely unconnected pieces about suffocating babies as well.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a bit of strange.
Normally one's enough for an episode.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. What I found surprising, Mark, when I looked into this, right, is even today...
God, you looked into this?
Of course, I look into everything,
I know
Mark.
you do. Sorry, I know
everything.
you do, but like I'm actually taken aback because like I thought this was such a non-item that. Go on, carry on. Now you've got me interested.
Considering we've had robots that do parkour, right?
Yeah.
You'd think that there'd be cake decorating robots coming out of our ears.
The wazoo, yeah.
Barely any of them still. Even today, you'd be hard pressed to find yourself a cake decorating robot. There's a couple of them. Nobody wants them. Everyone still wants to do it themselves by hand. If you get on the blower to Apex Motion Control or Unifiller Systems, they'll sell you a Baker bot or a Deco bot. But it's all very niche. But also, do you want to know whether they found that baby, Mark? I have checked.
Oh, I'm disappointed you checked because I did suggest that we could have.
I could save it.
Go on then.
I could save it for. Well, no.
No. I do now. Yeah, if you know, I know. I'd like to know.
So they do a sneaky little trick here, Mark. I reckon they're relying on the fact that people don't have recorded.
Yes.
So what they do, the 21st anniversary episode does look like a belter. It would be our longest episode ever because the episode itself is an hour long.
Oh man, we'd have to split up into two halves. There's no way we could.
But Raymondo's in it though. So
we have to do one of these anniversary episodes, definitely. Yeah.
Well, maybe episode 21. I don't know.
Oh, that makes sense.
But anyway, they at the very end of the program they show footage of a completely different baby from 1965, and they say, and this baby, we found her, and here she is. Right?
Here she is.
But it's definitely, the baby
we see it's
from a completely different segment. It's from a segment where they're demonstrating like babies gripping action or something. Like it's an entirely different segment. It's not a baby being resuscitated or anything like that. But I can imagine if you had just seen this and not watched it again and again like us, and you'd seen it 1 week after the other, you would just remember that they were looking for a baby.
And they found
and then
baby.
They show a baby at the end of this one. So it's a little tricker, a bit of tricksy woo there. But yeah, so they did find a baby, but not this baby.
Okay. Cheeky
and
bastards.
they didn't make her like sit there streaked in blood or anything to make it more authentic.
Oh, now I recognise her.
yeah. Now she's got a placenta draped over her shoulder. Yeah, that's all of it. I can see you getting tired, Mark. So maybe we should move on. To the old,
Yeah, forgive me. It is 5 to midnight, and it's not. I'm not tired of the episode. I'm just genuinely quite tired. Let's keep the energy up, eh? Hey, we can do it.
I'm all right. I had 13 hours sleep last night.
Wow. What made you wake up so early? Right, year in context, Russ. Tell us about 1986.
Right, we've got all the favourites. We've got all the favourites now.
Cinema box office.
Prime getting all of our ducks in a row. So, top 8, the box office.
Top 8, classic number.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, good 80s lineup.
Yeah.
Number 8, young Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, okay, yeah. Was that the film with first CGI, usage of CGI?
Yes, the CGI Knights.
The Knight in the
Church. I loved all of the various different special effects sequences in that.
The little cakes.
Oh, brilliant. The little cakes, and the... They're like wrought iron birds that come to life as well at one point.
I forgot about they were quite scary.
It's very good. In my mind, I always got it really confused with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom because there's parts of it that are really similar.
They go into a giant
to Indiana Jones
pyramid, an underground pyramid, don't they?
Yes, yeah.
Is he somebody's relation in real life? The guy who plays the young Sherlock? Did he do much?
No, but he looks really like Joe Cornish.
Did Joe
from
Cornish go up for the role?
Joe Cornish auditioned for it.
Yes, and now I recall. Yes, okay, thank you. Good.
Number 7, Clockwise,
oh my God.
John Cleese
not a fan.
thing, which I haven't seen for years, but I remember really liking it when I saw it.
I was not a fan.
But I mean, I saw it when I was a kid. I don't know whether it stood up at all. Number 6, Absolute Beginners.
Oh, not a great film, but a really good song. It was one of my favourite Bowie songs, actually.
Number 5, A Womb with a View.
Oh, I don't know that. A womb with a view.
A room with a view.
Oh, okay, that I'm aware of. I thought it was some kind of interesting 80s pastiche of a room with a view.
No,
like a womb.
No, the old Merchant Ivory one. That's got to be one of Helena Bonham Carter's first films, isn't it?
Yeah.
Seems early for her.
Is she in Wings of Desire as well?
Number 4, Fright Night.
Okay, the original.
Which I've only ever seen the remake of.
Yeah,
I've
no,
never
I've seen the
seen
original.
the,
no.
Number 3, Pretty in Pink.
Oh, yeah.
With Molly Ringworm. Number 2, The Cotton Club, which I've never seen.
Mm-hmm.
It's Francis Ford
I know
Coppola.
some of the songs from it. I haven't seen it.
And number 1, Jewel of the Nile.
Ah, not as good as Romancing the Stone.
No. But probably one of those ones that if you watched it now, you'd think, oh, that's actually really good compared to the dross that you see these days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a lot of like things that were kind of disappointing back then, when you watch them now, they quite often have much better production values and coherent plots than a lot of the dross that you see today.
Gosh, I feel like that this one might be one of the exceptions to the rule, though. I do remember this being a real car crash of a film, yeah, and like full of loads. Like, you know, cocaine may not have hit the UK, but it had definitely hit Hollywood by this point. Like, it is talking about melange of different elements. But I may be wrong. Actually, I wouldn't mind revisiting. Romancing the Stone, because I don't think I've ever really seen it as an adult, and I wonder if it would land differently. Maybe, you know, I did enjoy it as a kid. Okay, pop charts, 1986.
Now this is, I mean, there's some 80s classics in here. Number 10, The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston. Number 9, Lessons in Love by Level 42. Incidentally, Mark, you know, we talked about the Isle of Wight earlier.
Yes.
I did look up celebrities born on the Isle of Wight. Very few celebrities have been born on the Isle of Wight, but one of them is Mark King from Level 42.
Curious.
Number 8, Look Away by Big Country. Number 7, Can't Wait Another Minute by 5 Star. Number 6, A Kind of Magic by Queen. Number 5, Just Say No by the Grange Hill Cast.
Brilliant.
Number 4, Live to Tell by Madonna. Number 3.
I don't know that song, Live to Tell.
No, it doesn't sound familiar to me either. Number 3, What Have You Done For Me Lately by Janet Jackson. Which is a good song. I like that song. Number 2, Rock Me Amadeus by Falco.
Much missed.
And number 1, A Different Corner by George Michael.
Prices?
Prices. I did find some prices.
Well done.
Yes. So let's shout out some prices here. 4 cans of Heineken, £1.85.
What a great starting point. Yeah, okay.
Pint of bitter in a pub, 82 pence.
Yeah.
20 Lambert and Butlers, £1.34. 22-inch colour TV, $249.99.
Is that a lot of money? That seems like a lot of money. Was you 20?
Sanyo VHS recorder, $349.99, which in today's money is £800.
Wow.
Sinclair Spectrum, $159.99. Mobile phone,
Ooh.
the Mitsubishi Roma, £2,200, which in today's money is £5,000.
Crikey.
Copy of the Daily Mirror, 18 pence. Average house price, £48,000. Pint of milk, 19 pence. 6 bags of Smith's Crisps, 55 pence. And a Ford Sierra, £7,478.
Do you know, when we started doing the prices, the reason we could pretend it was worth talking about them was because, in theory, you could compare each episode to each episode. But I like the idea of randomly picking prices.
Yeah, I now like the idea of just throwing out random prices. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. A pack of 18 size 3 eggs, 99p. See, it's fun.
Yeah, especially when you say it in that style as well. Like one of those crap ads for like your local supermarket.
The JML. And of course, the Argos catalogue.
Oh, I almost moved on. Go on then.
It's a Russell Hobbs.
Yep.
The Russell Hobbs Highline Microchip Automatic 2 2/3 pint kettle with key metal body. I don't know what key metal is. Special metal that kettles are made out of? Don't know. Switches off when boiled. Boils as little as 1 cup of water. 2,000 watts. Yours for £21.95.
Very good. Very good. All right. Order time. Most important invention.
Easy peasy, Marky. Squeezy. It is, of course, the fibre optic laser.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
It's invented the internet, Mark. It's letting us do this now.
It says a lot that I didn't even, I thought about the life raft and immediately dismissed it. So, you know, something that literally saves lives. No, it's this fiber optic cable. It's the internet provider that can shoot down drones. That's the most important invention.
Yeah, it's going to come in handy during World War III as well, isn't it? Protecting us.
It's a common. Most worthless invention?
Riding high here, I think, in terms of invention, because one of them isn't an invention. So the cot death thing is garbage, but it's not an invention.
No.
The pumping seawater onto land.
Oh, God, I completely forgot about that. Yeah, go on.
Is garbage, but kind of at least a development or an idea, concept. Utterly useless.
Yeah.
What were you thinking of then?
The beacon that didn't even last a year.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been used though if it. That at least functioned exactly as intended.
Correct.
It's just that circumstances.
It's not the beacon's fault. The GPS.
It's a victim of circumstance, right?
No, you're absolutely right. It's the seawater nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah,
it has to be 100%. God, I mean, just even the first time I watched it, I thought, hang on a minute, I'm pretty sure this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then I was like, but you're persuaded by Judith Hann's confidence, not least because we've seen her talk confidently and so assuredly and so knowledgeably about other things quite effectively. And here she's just selling us a pup. Most inaccurate prediction of the future.
Judith did say that the sea level was going to raise to
10 feet?
10 feet,
yeah.
Which is unlikely.
And the Americans did predict that Chernobyl was so serious they'd have to shut down all of the 3 remaining reactors, which also didn't happen. The 10 feet sea thing is actually, I think I'd be persuaded to go with that. And I'll tell you why, is because she says that quite casually, like that'll make no impact whatsoever.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind we're sweating bullets over, 90 centimeters, 10 feet of seawater. It's like, okay, there's barely a first floor room that wouldn't survive that kind of impact throughout Britain, let alone... Yeah, that's it. I mean, clearly that's it. Sorry, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be, isn't it?
We're screwed by a presenter. I feel like Macann's...
It's poor old Macann,
isn't it? Yeah, because he's normally so elegant.
He is, yeah. And I don't think I mentioned it, but it's specifically there's one bit where he says items instead of atoms.
Yeah. Normally Macann is the very kind of definition of that kind of the metaphor about the swan, isn't it? There's this beautiful, elegant white bird and it's paddling underwater. This swan is very much upside down and all we can see is the flailing legs. Best attempt at making something boring interesting.
I suppose it's got to be, once Macann again, chucking a brick at a sign.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. A little bit of
excitement there, wasn't there?
What a way to start the show.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It certainly makes you sit up and pay attention, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't he? Macann's threatening us with a brick. Yeah.
Exactly.
I will pay attention.
And it's a particularly crap invention, so it's,
Yes, it is. Yeah. No wonder he's throwing a brick at it. Best use of music? Vaughan Williams.
Oh, it's the Vaughan Williams at the beginning of... I think it might be the only music as well.
I think it is the only music that I certainly remember.
It's a good use of it.
Yeah. It works really well. It's a nice marriage of soundtrack and image, because it is these lovely, as you say, these lovely sweeping vistas, and clearly in a jet plane because of the way there's banking. Best or worst use of furniture?
It's that horrible crib.
Oh, wow. Yeah, brilliant. God, it's awful, isn't it?
Crib.
Yeah, it's really bleak. I swear we had something like that when we were as a family. Like probably my crib that my brother also used, because that kind of style of art I really recognise, and it's possibly because my mum gave me all my birthday cards from either my 0th or first birthday, and they were all that kind of style, that kind of tweed.
I can imagine, yeah.
Bunnies and bears and stuff like that. Oh, great shout. Did we see any...
crying out for some SIDS if I've got put in that.
God, we really are at the end of this, aren't we? Did we see anything in the episode that made it through to the future?
Yeah.
A lot, actually.
That life raft is actually still the leading life raft of that type.
Optical
Obviously,
fibers.
the fibre optics.
Yep.
Virgin Atlantic Challenger.
Yeah.
Although it was swiftly beaten a few years later. Chernobyl is still there.
Yep, true.
Cot death still happens.
SIDS, yeah.
Yeah.
And what does this episode tell us about the 1st of May 1986?
It's prime tomorrow's world country, I would say. It's actually in the sweet spot that we enjoy.
Where absolutely.
There's still interesting and varied technological developments. There's not too much computers doing everything. There's great fashions, well presented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again,
Love it.
I know we said this obviously because we've done a few episodes in and around this time, but like there is a nice kind of optimistic sheen about the whole program.
Yep.
Do you know, probably part of the reason that we do enjoy this is because it is our childhood's optimistic vision of the future that we're looking at.
Yeah.
It's like these are the promises that were made to us. We weren't promised the kind of the Baxter Willy Woolard period, and actually quite a lot of that is quite bleak. This is what we were promised. So I suppose it's maybe sweeter for us to get back to this particular time and kind of audit. It's distinctly possible that we watched this. You know, we're quite young, but like maybe a few years later. But definitely this kind of nonsense. And obviously we definitely grew up watching every BBC presenter being dunked into God, it was like some kind of mass baptism. That's what TV was in the 80s and 90s. Okay, TW tropes. Presenter having to speak over loud noises. Never have I ticked this box harder.
Tick, tick, tick.
It kind of starts and finishes that way, doesn't it? Maggie Philbin's sleeves don't match her body. They literally do. It's astonishing.
They match perfectly, but what an extraordinary outfit.
It's not what we're looking for, unfortunately. Stanley
no.
Kubrick reference? I didn't see anything. No. Something to do with oil rigs. I think that's a yes, and a yes.
Absolutely.
We're doing a little bit of business there, but yeah. Suspiciously obvious brand name on the ad-free BBC. Well, you spotted the name of the company.
RFD Aviation, mate. RFD Aviation.
You can stop saying it now. They've had enough exposure. But you also point out, like, it almost looks like it's deliberately revealed.
Yeah.
Clear and blatant lying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that whole cot death thing is
Are they lying though? They're being lied to, and they're giving it to us.
Someone's lying, Mark.
Sorry. Evil farmers?
No.
It's a farm-free episode.
The farms are too, yeah.
Casual sexism. I didn't spot anything.
Certainly not in this episode. I mean, we could include the Blue Peter corsets section.
We could, but I feel like we put that in there.
Yeah.
Dad joke from Howard Stableford. There certainly is.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. As he's being winched from the raft into the helicopter, because I wrote this down, he says, as he's going up, he says, it was only last week I was asking my boss for a rise, but, which is a really good dad joke in that it kind of borderline doesn't make sense. Like, it's not the right form of words that anyone would use in either context. He's not rising.
He does deserve a rise, though. I mean, they really put him through his paces this episode.
Yeah,
I think this is the most punishment Stapleford's had we've seen so
and again,
far.
it doesn't really seem like he's thoroughly enjoying himself. Episode ends on a damp squib.
Yep.
Machine. And then finally, Woolard or Macann abroad. We have a Macann.
Well, this is interesting. Macann, he's only in Lowestoft.
He is only in Lowestoft. There is the promise
but
of
he
travel.
is very much softening us up for the fact that he's zooming across the Atlantic later in the summer.
Absolutely.
So
I can't half tick something, so we have to leave it. But that's
Alright.
it. That's another order done, Russ. I can close the ledger. And we can put this bed to rest. No one needs to watch or think about this episode ever again. Do you know what? That is the Tomorrow's World all-time promise. You never have to think about these episodes ever again after this episode.
Well, Mark, I've decided, I mentioned earlier, the Dutch have this wonderful system where they can flood half the country to stop people invading.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, well, probably best, just in case the Russians start coming for us, that I just get out there and just set this thing off and separate us from the Russians right now.
You'll be cheered.
You know, preemptive strike.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to try and go out and do that. And of course, I'll be partially solving climate change at the same time. So
Very true.
Everyone's a winner.
Brilliant.
So look out for me on the news.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be the one in the heli raft. Yeah, so until next time, which will hopefully soon.
Yeah.
I will bid you all farewell who are listening. Goodbye to you, Mark.
Goodbye.
And we will see you tomorrow.
Bye.